Employment the highest since the Great Depression era. People have been sharply reducing their spending. Jonathan Golub is chief U.S. equity strategist at Credit Suisse Securities.
The cyclical part of the market, and now we're talking about the auto companies and the retailers, the restaurants, hotels, industrials, the like. In the second quarter, they're expected to be down between 90 and 100%, which means that 25% or so of the market will make absolutely no profits whatsoever.
This week we'll be hearing from a number of high-profile retailers, including Walmart, Home Depot, Kohl's, Lowe's, Target, L Brands, TJX, and Best Buy. Charlie Pellet, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Charlie, thank you. S&P futures are higher this morning, up 41 points. Dow futures up 356, and NASDAQ futures up 104. 10-year Treasury down 132nd, yield 0.64%, and the yield on the 2-year 0.14%. NYMEX crude oil up 7.8%, up $2.30 at $31.73 a barrel. And COMEX gold is up 0.8%, or $14.80 at $17.71 an ounce. The euro 1.0808 against the dollar, and the yen is at 107.29. And straight ahead, we have the latest world and national news. This is Bloomberg.
Okay, Karen, thanks. 6:33 on Wall Street, and Michael Barr has more on what's going on around the world. Michael?
Thank you very much, Nathan. New York Governor Andrew Cuomo called for more New Yorkers to get tested for COVID-19 as the state reopens for business. Cuomo underwent a nasal swab test himself at his daily briefing. He also announced 2 regions of New York State that have had good, steady numbers.
There's been a shift in the capital region and in western New York, where on the 7 metrics, they are now qualified for reopening.
New York Mayor Bill de Blasio says beaches will remain closed for Memorial Day, saying we're just not there yet. The mayor also slammed people for gathering outside bars in the city without face masks. De Blasio says he will close them down if we have to. De Blasio also announced the city has partnered with CityMD, one of the largest urgent care companies, to take up the task of testing for COVID-19.
This now puts us ahead of our goal. We had said we wanted to get the capacity for 20,000 tests per day by Monday, May 25th. I can tell you we have now hit the goal a week early.
De Blasio says CityMD will do 6,000 tests daily in addition to what the city has already been doing. He says those who are insured will have their insurance billed, and CityMD is picking up the cost of the uninsured. Non-essential stores in New Jersey are set to reopen with curbside pickup today. Governor Phil Murphy says they are better prepared now to handle a surge in cases should it happen.
We need the capacities that we didn't have as a country or as a state when this started: beds, ventilators, PPE, medicines, etc.
California Governor Gavin Newsom says the Senate very much needs to start a procedure to look at the new stabilization legislation passed by the House. Bloomberg's Ed Baxter has the story.
Governor Newsom says the Senate Republicans flatly rejecting the funding bill is not looking at those it would benefit.
These same folks that say it's dead on arrival, I hope they'll consider this. The next time they want to salute and celebrate our heroes, our first responders, our police officers and firefighters, consider the fact that they are the first ones to be laid off by cities and counties.
Newsom on CNN says there must be negotiation and, most important, help. In San Francisco, I'm Ed Baxter, Bloomberg Daybreak.
Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
All right, Michael, thanks. Almost 6:36 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Sports Update with John Stashauer.
Nathan, not a great weekend for the NFL. Ex-Giant wideout Cody Latimer, now with Washington, arrested on assault and weapons charges in Colorado. Buffalo defensive lineman Ed Oliver got a DWI with gun charges in Houston, and the Giants' DeAndre Baker and Seattle's Quentin Dunbar both surrendered to authorities in Florida. Baker released on bond after spending the night in jail. Faces 4 counts of aggravated assault with a firearm. It is said to have been a dispute that came out of gambling losses and a dice game. The Giants have told Baker to not be part of their offseason meetings. NHL Board of Governors will have a call today. The Athletic has details of what hockey might look like upon its return this summer. 3-week training camp in June, and then in July, at least some games to complete the regular season, and then an expanded 24-team playoff field, 12 in each conference. That should put the Rangers into the playoffs, otherwise they'd be out. Another aspect learned about the baseball plan, no fights, or if there are, severe penalties for those who initiate and participate. Obviously, that would be physical contact deemed unnecessary. 2 days ago would have been the Preakness, second jewel of racing's Triple Crown. The Kentucky Derby had already been moved to early September, and now the Preakness has a rescheduled date of October 3rd. The Belmont in New York would presumably be some time after that. They had a NASCAR race yesterday, Darlington, South Carolina, no fans. Kevin Harvick got the win. It was the first real major sporting event in the U.S. in 9 weeks. PGA Tour back in June. There was a made-for-TV charity skins game yesterday in Florida. The team of Rory McIlroy and Dustin Johnson over Ricky Fowler and Matthew Wolff. Over $5 million was raised. May 18th, this date in sports history, 2004, a perfect game thrown by Randy Johnson at the age of 40. John Stashower, Bloomberg Sports. Nathan?
And John, this red headline just crossed the Bloomberg terminal. Chinese oil demand is all but back to levels last seen before Beijing imposed a nationwide lockdown to fight the coronavirus outbreak. That's according to people with inside knowledge of China's energy industry. It's a remarkable turnaround after demand for crude crashed by about 20% in February. But now sources tell Bloomberg News consumption of gasoline and diesel has fully recovered as factories reopen and commuters drive rather than use public transport. Checking prices right now, West Texas Intermediate's up 7.75% at $31.71 a barrel. Brent is up 5.75% at $34.38. It is 6:38 on Wall Street.
The following commentary is from Bloomberg Opinion.
The fight over COVID-19 vaccines is getting ugly. I'm Lionel Laurent, columnist at Bloomberg Opinion. The French government is furious at Sanofi. The French drug maker said the U.S. would be first in line for its COVID-19 vaccine because the U.S. had financed it first. Sanofi has a point. Vaccine research can cost up to $1 billion. If the U.S. taxpayer is willing to foot the bill, they should reap some of the reward. Sanofi's vaccine is not produced in a vacuum. The company benefits from European shareholders, employees, factories, and generous tax credits every year. French taxpayers might wonder why that shouldn't be taken into account. Either way, simply lashing out at Sanofi is not really a long-term solution. If governments are going to fight to get to the front of the line every time, this will turn into an ugly and harmful vaccine trade war. European countries should instead work together more to take on the financial risk of vaccines. Then they could share the rewards more equally. And by collaborating globally, countries have more chance of dictating terms to big pharma companies focused on the bottom line. Fairer access to vaccines and drugs is an issue for all countries, not just France. I'm Lionel Laurent. For more opinion, please go to Bloomberg.com/opinion or OPIN Go on the Bloomberg terminal.
This has been Bloomberg Opinion.
You can hear Bloomberg Opinion commentaries every weekday at this time. Terminal customers can read more at OPIN Go. It's 6:39 on Wall Street. Time for the Bloomberg Green Report. Here's Bob Moon.
It's a horrible side effect of the deadly coronavirus pandemic, unpleasant to talk about but impossible to ignore. Around-the-clock cremations, now allowed in some parts of the country to deal with the backlog, are disproportionately threatening low-income communities where those facilities are often clustered. Chemicals released by their smokestacks include mercury, a toxin that can harm the nervous, digestive, and immune systems and can even be fatal. It comes mostly from dental fillings, which are vaporized but not consumed in the cremation process. Particulate matter is also released from sulfur dioxide to carbon monoxide. And industry trade group figures cremation rates may be as high as 80% now. Historically, they're less than 50%. The industry says its emissions are too low to raise serious environmental concerns. A researcher at Communities for a Better Environment says crematory operators often find it easier to locate in low-income areas because residents have fewer resources to fight back. That's the Bloomberg Green Business Report. I'm Bob Moon.
Thank you, Bob. Futures in the green this morning. S&P futures up 43 points. Dow futures up 375. NASDAQ futures higher by 115 points. This is Bloomberg.
Have you wanted to speak a new language, but you thought it'd be too hard or take too much time? Then go to Babbel.com, download the app, and try it for free. In just 15 minutes a day, you'll be on your way to speaking a new language in just a few weeks. And right now, you can try Babbel for free. Babbel starts out teaching you words and phrases by matching them with pictures. You won't believe how easy the interactive program is. Soon the sentences get a little bigger, and before you know it, you're having simulated conversations voiced by native speakers. And because Babbel is crafted by language experts and uses the spaced repetition method, in just 10 to 15 minutes a day, you'll be speaking the language of your choice with real confidence. With Babbel, you can speak a language. Just go to Babbel.com and start your first lesson in the language of your choice for free. Download the Babbel app or go to Babbel.com and try it for free. That's BABBEL.com.
Hey y'all, Jeff Foxworthy here. Now, if you've ever found yourself repeating the same thing over and over for 75 years, you might be Smokey Bear.
Only you can prevent wildfires.
That's why I'm filling in for Smokey to switch things up, because there's a lot more to say. And I should know because my grandfather was a firefighter. And one of the things he taught me is that the people that love the outdoors the most are often the ones accidentally starting wildfires, which means always BYOB. No, bring your own bucket to the campfire. And be extra careful with things like burning yard trimmings. Don't just walk away, or chances are you might be starting a wildfire. So for the love of the outdoors, go to SmokeyBear.com to learn more about wildfire prevention. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
This is a Bloomberg.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years.
Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable!
Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
We're all in uncharted territory looking for ways to support our communities. At Dell Technologies, we're making sure small businesses have the right tech solutions. Dell Technologies advisors are here for you, helping small businesses stay connected and productive while working remotely with Windows 10 Pro and Microsoft Teams. We're standing by you every step of the way. Call us today on 0800 169 1745. That's 0800 169 1745.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Be part of the college sports conversation on TuneIn. Hear the latest storylines around SEC football with the Paul Feinbaum Show.
I distinctly remember when you were hired, and I must say most of us thought you were out of your mind. Giving up, I wouldn't call it a cush job because you were traveling across the country.
Get your college hoops fix with college basketball talk on NBC Sports.
Headed by Shabazz Napier, that also included Amita Brima, who is in and around the NBA ranks right now, and DeAndre Daniels, who was the 37th pick in the 2014 NBA draft. So my question to you is...
Or listen to the daily news from around the wide world of college football with College Football Live.
I would go with Utah. I think Utah is the better team. And I know I'm talking to an Oklahoma guy, but listen, and it may be recency bias having watched Utah last week and doing that game, but I just think they're a more complete football.
Discover these and more college sports podcasts right here on TuneIn.
News and financial information 24 hours a day. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. This is Bloomberg Radio. Now, a global news update.
Special report, coronavirus update. Trump calls Obama grossly incompetent. Bob Costantini explains.
On Saturday, former President Barack Obama delivered a commencement address to historically black colleges and universities.
This pandemic has finally torn back the curtain on the idea that so many of the folks in charge know what they're doing. A lot of them aren't even pretending to be in charge.
Sunday afternoon, returning from Camp David, the president saying he'd not heard of the Obama comments.
Look, he was an incompetent president. That's all I can say. Grossly incompetent.
That is not all the president has had to say. Verbally and on Twitter, he blames his predecessor and former Vice President Joe Biden for the Russia investigation, all the way to how hard it's been to get medical supplies for the COVID-19 pandemic. Bob Costantini, Washington.
The U.S. is nearing 90,000, the number of people killed by coronavirus. That, according to Johns Hopkins Medical Center, over 4.5 million are infected worldwide. I'm John Trout.
They don't just talk to the most important people.
Is it as ominous this time around?
They talk with the most interesting people.
Are they taking this seriously?
Bloomberg Markets, weekday mornings at 10 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio. Bloomberg, the world is listening. Markets, headlines, and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow, and futures on the rise this morning. S&P futures up 44 points, Dow futures up 378, NASDAQ futures up 117. The DAX in Germany's up 2.7%, 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 0.64%. And the yield on the 2-year, 0.14%. NYMEX crude oil is up 8.2% or $2.41 at $31.84 a barrel. And COMEX gold up 0.8% or $14.80 at $17.71.10 an ounce. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Now here's Michael Barr with more on what's going on around the world. Michael.
Karen, the number of deaths from the coronavirus in the U.S. is approaching 90,000. Almost all states have now reopened some select businesses, with many Americans venturing outside their homes for the first time in a long time. New Jersey is allowing curbside pickup at retail stores. A Canadian aerobatic jet crashed into the British Columbia neighborhood of Kamloops during a flyover intended to boost morale during the pandemic, killing a crew member. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Nathan.
Thank you, Michael. We are live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studios, where it's 6:48 on Wall Street. Time to check what's going on in D.C., where the Trump administration is ramping up the blame game with China over the origins of the coronavirus.
The Chinese, behind the shield of the World Health Organization, for 2 months hid the virus from the world and then sent hundreds of thousands of Chinese on aircraft to Milan, New York, and around the world to seed that.
White House trade advisor Peter Navarro made that accusation on ABC's This Week as he defended the administration's response to the outbreak in February, when President Trump was publicly downplaying the threat and praising China. On NBC's Meet the Press, Navarro also laid blame on the Centers for Disease Control.
The CDC, which really had the most trusted brand around the world in this space, really let the country down with the testing, because not only did they keep the testing within the bureaucracy, they had a bad test, and that did set us back.
I don't believe the CDC let this country down. I believe the CDC serves an important public health role, and what was always critical was to get the private sector to the table.
Health and Human Services Secretary Alex Azar was on CBS's Face the Nation. So was House Speaker Nancy Pelosi. She says she backs an investigation into the Friday night firing of State Department Inspector General Scott Linick.
The president has the right to fire any federal employee. But the fact is, if it looks like it's in retaliation for something that the IG, the Inspector General, is doing, that could be unlawful.
Linick is the fourth IG the president has fired in recent weeks. Navarro responded on This Week.
I don't mourn the loss of people when they leave this bureaucracy. There's always going to be somebody better to replace them, somebody more loyal, not to the president necessarily, but to the Trump agenda. That's what's important.
And that is some of the conversation from the political shows heard every Sunday on Bloomberg Radio, NBC's Meet the Press, Fox News Sunday, ABC's This Week, and Face the Nation from CBS. Let's get more now from Bloomberg U.S. politics editor Kathleen Hunter. And we heard that accusation, Kate, from Peter Navarro, essentially accusing China of seeding the coronavirus in the early days of the outbreak. How did you read that claim from Navarro?
Well, it feels like an escalation, Nathan, I'd say, from some of the rhetoric that we've heard. It's already been pretty strong from Trump and other members of his administration. While he didn't really explicitly say this, and kind of seemed to indicate otherwise later on in the interview, it does sort of leave the impression or that, the White House, the Trump administration is now accusing China of actually, deliberately trying to spread the virus rather than just through, neglect, doing what they should have done to try to contain it. It kind of takes it that step further and raises the question of whether that's going to be the direction that the White House now moves.
How do you expect China to respond to this now that President Xi is addressing the World Health Organization at its decision-making body's meeting today?
Well, I think that's going to be really, really interesting to watch, what President Xi has to say, in Geneva today, when he addresses the World Health Organization. This is really going to be, a critical moment to see how, both the U.S. and more broadly, the rest of the international community responds to China, because there have been questions, many questions, not just from the U.S., but elsewhere about China's handling of the virus and its transparency or lack thereof about the spread in the early days. And so I think that's going to be very interesting to watch what Xi has to say, and more importantly, really how he's received, and particularly how he's received by the Trump administration and perhaps even Trump himself, and what they have to say once Xi delivers whatever message he plans to deliver.
And we are watching headlines cross the Bloomberg terminal as Xi addresses the UN health body. He's saying that China's COVID-19 vaccine will be a global public good. This is a pretty interesting aspect of the debate here, Kate, isn't it? Because there's been a lot of talk from the private vaccine makers that are racing to come up with an inoculation for COVID-19 as to whether countries will have equal access to it.
Yeah, that's been a huge question, and there's been a bit of a kind of space race type scenario when it comes to different countries trying to beat each other out in terms of access for this still forthcoming, not yet developed vaccine. And so I think that's certainly a dynamic that's going to be very interesting to continue to watch going forward.
All right, in the couple minutes we have left here, let's talk about this move now, the latest move by the president to oust an inspector general, this time the State Department's IG, Steve Linick. This seems to be sparking, at the very least, concern at a bipartisan level.
Absolutely. And I think obviously, when it comes to Congress, it's always more interesting when we see Republicans, expressing their concern or their dismay with actions that Trump has taken. I think in this instance, this is one of those issues that kind of, crosses party lines, because it moves more into the territory of separation of powers and, members of Congress, regardless of party, wanting to preserve the legislature's ability to have oversight of the executive branch, and in this case, President Trump. And I think the concern here is that perhaps, that Linick in his role was looking into potential, misconduct on the part of Mike Pompeo, who we all know is very close to President Trump. And so I think the concern here is that, perhaps there was an element of wanting to curb that investigation in Trump's decision. So what we're seeing is Republicans, at the very least, calling for some additional clarification from the White House about why this step was taken, because I think that is done very late on a Friday. That's typically when things are done that, in Washington, in an effort to try to give less attention to them. And so I think that I would expect Republicans to continue to press this week for at least some additional information from the White House about why this happened.
Just 30 seconds left here. Do you expect that Republican concern to rise beyond that level of just concern?
Well, I think it depends on how the White House handles it. I think it certainly could rise above that level, because this is something, again, where Republicans, are more identified as legislators than they do necessarily with their own party.
All right. Thanks, as always, Kate. Good talking with you this morning. That's Kathleen Hunter. She is a U.S. politics editor for Bloomberg News. Karen.
Nathan, thank you. It is 6:55 on Wall Street, and Bloomberg Daybreak is brought to you by SEI. Challenges highlight one's character, partnership, and resilience. At SEI, they act as one community with their clients. Go to SEIC.com/banks. Now it's time for the Bloomberg Small Business Report with John Tucker. John, good morning.
Hi, Karen. It'll be 17 years this July that the toy professor in Summit, New Jersey has been putting smiles on kids' faces. This small toy store is something of a rarity in the age of the internet and large department stores. Today, New Jersey starts allowing retailers like Toy Professor to do curbside pickup. Owner Jeff Stern is with us this morning. Jeff, tell us what kind of hit the business has taken from stay-at-home restrictions. Also, how much of a boost you expect from curbside pickup?
I would say at the high end, as I said, right now I have lost about 80% of my business, so I'm doing 20%. I'm hoping with the knowledge that all stores are allowed to do curbside pickup, that there'll be a greater knowledge of the opportunity to do that. The best case, I double it, so I do 40% of my business, and therefore I'm out 60%.
I was surprised you don't have an online presence. You've always preferred to have the interaction with customers, right?
I'm not purely driven by money, although I do want to make a nice living, make a nice profit. I run my store for the contact, with my customers, the moms, the dads, the grandparents, and the children who are fabulous, and being around the toys and the fun all day. You do not get that from online business.
Do you suppose once the door is open for good everywhere, small locations like yours will actually have an advantage?
I would just say that small stores, small neighborhood stores, are probably one of the safest places to be, because we can easily control the traffic flow, easily control social distancing. Even typically at full business range, other than a few odd times during the week, there's rarely more than one or two customers in the store during the day. And we can easily manage that and crowd control and keep it to, say, a couple of customers in the store.
Okay, Jeff, thanks very much for your time this morning. Jeff Stern, owner of Toy Professor in Summit, New Jersey, opening for curbside pickup. And we'll continue to bring you stories of small businesses and how they're coping in the face of the global pandemic every weekday at this time. I'm John Tucker. That is your Bloomberg Small Business Report for today. Karen.
All right, John Tucker, thank you. S&P futures on the rise, up 44 points. Dow futures up 379. NASDAQ futures up 120. 10-year Treasury down 1/32, yield 0.64%. And we continue to watch crude oil. NYMEX crude at $31.81 a barrel. Bloomberg surveillance is straight ahead with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz. For Nathan Hager, I'm Karen Moscow, and this is Bloomberg.
Just this wall and that one to do, Dave, and then we're done. Whoop! Oh, no! Hello, Steve the Sparky.
Pass us that roof tile, Chris.
Yep, sure. I'll be fun. Oh, no.
Saved by the gutter.
Built to rough it with contractors. Samsung rugged devices. Easy to use, hard to break. Explore the Samsung rugged range.
The garden tools that mean you can grow your own. The fire pit that turns tea time into an alfresco dining experience. The paddling pool that turns your back garden into a water park. With a choice of ways to pay, you can make the most of family time. You can say yes when it matters most at very.co.uk. Goods and services provided by Shop Direct Home Shopping Limited. Credit provided. Subject to status by Shop Direct Finance Company Limited. 18+.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
You'll make a call given the data.
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
Get all the pieces.
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction.
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
A lot of us are still in a bit of a guessing game, trying to determine how severe the downturn will be. The only thing that can bring an end to the crisis is containing the disease.
Finance.
We are the one country where people depend on employment for health insurance in the middle of a health crisis.
Investment.
Real yield is a scarce asset these days. It's just unknowable, of course, where things are going.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz on Bloomberg Radio.
From New York City for our audience worldwide, good morning, good morning. This
It is Bloomberg Surveillance. Coming up on the program, Powell's limitless pledge sending stocks higher, China facing challenges at the WHO's annual meeting, and supply cuts helping lift crude through $30. From the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio, hello Monday. Here is your Monday morning rally. Equity futures up 47. We are positive 1.65% on the S&P 500, bouncing back from last week's losses. In the bond market, muted price action. I'm looking at commodities for two reasons. Crude catching a bid, up by almost 9% on WTI to $32 a barrel. Supply being cut, demand slowly normalizing in places like China. Elsewhere, gold up by 1 full percentage point to 1763. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro. Together with Lisa Abramich, you are listening to Bloomberg Surveillance. Just a few words from Chairman Powell, enough to lift this market. We are not out of ammunition by a long shot. There's really no limit to what we can do with these lending programs. And Lisa, it is a limitless Chair Jay Powell that is fueling this rally this morning.
Yeah, and he was really emulating Ben Bernanke when he started talking about printing money. And he said it's easy. We just do it electronically and we can do whatever we want with it. And this comes ahead of a rash of auctions expected this week from the Treasury Department, with the Fed expected to buy them. This is the interesting aspect, John. Even as we see stocks indicated up, yields pretty flat, even on the long end, considering the heft of issuance that we see coming up.
Really muted price action in treasuries. We'll try and discuss that a little bit later. Also pretty interesting. If you told me everything on Friday evening into the weekend and then said, guess where futures will open up before this Chairman Powell interview took place, I was expecting them to open lower because of what was happening between the United States and China. But seemingly the Federal Reserve's big push is offsetting any nervousness around that story.
Yeah, and today we do have the World Health Organization's annual decision-making meeting, which I think is going to be really interesting in light of some of these tensions. Just sort of pushing forward to the rest of the week. Tomorrow we get Fed Chair Powell and Treasury Secretary Stephen Mnuchin possibly adding to this sense that policy measures can continue to escalate. And Wednesday, the Treasury auctions off $20 billion of 20-year bonds. Those are the first of their kind since the 1980s. And just to your point, John, earlier about the flatness in yields, the expected yield is an entire 1.1% on those 20-year bonds.
An entire 1.1%. I'm looking forward to seeing that. May 20th for $20 billion of 20-year notes. I think it was Michael McKee that pointed out a couple of weeks ago when this was announced that someone was having some kind of joke with numbers, but that's what's happening a little bit later this week. Great lineup of guests through this morning. Looking forward to catching up with Steve Englander of Standard Chartered on foreign exchange and the labour market. Really happy to say we can start the week with Lisa Shallard of Morgan Stanley Wealth Management, the Chief Investment Officer. Lisa, you and I have gone back and forth over the last couple of weeks. Help us understand the cyclical trade and how you think that's going to evolve in the coming months.
Yeah, great. Good morning, Jonathan. Look, our perspective is that, folks have really looked at the cyclical trade and are waiting to see the inflation expectations data signal that reflation in the economy has begun. And we've really seen, the cyclical's defensive ratio track inflation expectations. To your point, I think this news, coming out of the Fed and, the market's reaction to it, meaning they are believing Chairman Powell for what he is saying, is ultimately going to be a positive catalyst in that regard and start firming up those inflation expectations. I think when you go to full-on debt monetization, which is really, I think, where we are, that's the point at which it becomes very clear, what the Fed is doing. They're debasing the U.S. dollar. They're pushing down, real rates. And ultimately, the U.S. dollar has to roll over. And the rollover of that U.S. dollar from what has been, just extraordinary heights on a trade-weighted basis is going to be one of the things that triggers a return of a little bit of inflation. And that's all you need here to get those cyclicals going.
Lisa, what's the dollar going to be debased against? What currency is actually going to gain prominence versus the greenback?
So our perspective is that most, and what I mean by that is, remember that at the end of the day, currencies move in relation to relative yield advantages and relative growth. And while for a good portion of the last 3 or 4 years, the U.S. really had a real yield advantage and a real growth advantage, what coronavirus has done is kind of level the playing field quite a bit. And what we've seen in the near term is simply an extension of the fear trade that's really holding the dollar up, in our humble opinion. Because when you look underneath the surface, the relative growth of the U.S. economy is really not that much better than what's going on in the rest of the world. And real rates are really starting to come down.
Lisa, I want you to give me the real scoop. You're in wealth management. You're legendary in the street. You've seen the up down. You've seen how many once in a lifetime crises, Lisa, have you and I had combined?
Oh, really? 2, 3. They're getting more frequent.
There's no fingers left over, folks. Lisa, the textbook says, you walk into a Morgan Stanley office, you're supposed to go, there's a 60-30 split, 60% stocks, 30% bonds, and 10% cash, because that's what you're supposed to do. Baloney. What's the actual split right now?
Oh, goodness. So, look, the vast majority of our clients are extraordinarily conservative and have been, quote unquote, hoarding cash. And, as is often the case, and we know this from behavioral finance, it's a playbook, played out to a T. A lot of clients, unfortunately, sold badly. They gave in to fear, and throughout the February-March timeframe, built their cash balances up to 2 times normal. So you talk about the 10% being an average. We're running closer to 2 times that at about 20% cash.
John, I just want to say it's early in the week, and that's already the phrase of the week. That defines my investment past, John.
Do you feel good that so many people have shared your cash allocation, Tom?
I sold badly.
Lisa, let's talk about how this evolves, because you've said that we could see some inflation and maybe that will move things along. We're about to see some real sequential month-on-month improvement in the next couple of months. We'll get the PMIs later this week. May should be better than April. June should be better than May. Does that help get it done, or is that just already widely expected?
Well, I think the piece that isn't expected is that what we're going to see is a lot of lumpiness between supply and demand. Because don't forget, what we did is we, sudden stop turned off the economy. And so the supply chains are imbalanced. And so while the market is universally discounting the demand side of things, they're not really thinking about the supply side of things. And the supply side of things, in many cases, is going to be delayed. And it's that delay and mismatch in the supply chains that could cause, some price inflation to creep in as people are willing to, quote unquote, pay up to refill their shelves. And, I do think we are going to begin to see a pickup in some of those metrics around prices paid, wages paid, particularly among small businesses.
So just real quick here, Lisa, what do you think it will take to shift the current mood that policy trumps the fundamental economic data? Is there anything that could come out, whether it's rising trade tensions or anything else, to reverse this shift?
You mean reverse a reflationary trade?
Yes.
So look, there are obviously a host of things, and not the least of which is the virus itself. Look, right now, we are seeing, clearly nationwide curve flattening, and that has been definitely something that the market understands and is embracing. And I think if we were to have any major setbacks on that, the narrative is still extraordinarily vulnerable to that. Obviously, now is not the time for us to see a pickup in trade tensions, nor is it, quite frankly, a time for us to see a pickup in political partisanship. One of the things that we need to remember is that the major provisions of the CARES Act that we've been talking about as, quote unquote, monstrous stimulus, begin to expire in the, June, July, September timeframe. We're going to need some extensions, and we're going to need some cooperation between here and probably July, August, before we get into the peak of the political presidential campaigning. And if we have stumbles and it looks like Washington's becoming dysfunctional, the market's really not going to like that either. So those would be the three that we're looking at.
Lisa, brilliant to catch up with you, as always. Lisa Shallard there, Morgan Stanley Wealth Management Chief Investment Officer. And a special thanks to Tom Keene for showing up this morning.
I overslept. I'm sorry, I overslept.
Overslept on TV before you came to radio?
No, I stayed up all weekend. I watched every Fred Willard movie. Fred Willard dying at 86.
Well, there's a transition.
Yeah. Wow. That changed the mood.
Am I meant to come back from that?
I watched Best in Show 3 times.
Okay.
It's a classic movie about the Mayflower Dog Show.
Brilliant to have you back with us, Tom. Thank you. Should we get some news, some headlines worldwide? Here's Michael Barr.
John, Lisa, Tom, thank you very much. The Trump administration stepped up its campaign of blaming China for the deadly coronavirus pandemic, with the top aide suggesting Beijing sent airline passengers to spread the infection worldwide. White House trade advisor Peter Navarro said on ABC's This Week the virus was spawned in Wuhan province. Patient 0 was in November.
The Chinese, behind the shield of the World Health Organization, for 2 months hid the virus from the world and then sent hundreds of thousands of Chinese on aircraft to Milan, New York, and around the world to seed that.
ABC's This Week can be heard Sundays on Bloomberg Radio. The Florida Keys will reopen to tourists on June 1st, more than 2 months after the island chain closed to visitors to minimize the spread of the coronavirus. Hotels and other lodging establishments will also be allowed to reopen at 50% occupancy. A member of the Canadian Forces Snowbirds team was killed and another was seriously injured following a jet crash. The plane is said to have been preparing to continue Operation Inspiration, the nickname for a series of cross-country flyovers to support and thank frontline workers in the COVID-19 pandemic. Kamloops Mayor Ken Christian.
This accident today really shakes us to our core, but we will respond to it in every way that we can to support the Canadian military as well as the women and men in service.
The Royal Canadian Air Force says that the surviving member of the crash does not have life-threatening injuries. Global news 24 hours a day on air.
I'm Karen Mock.
Quick take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Lisa, Tom.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Here is your Monday morning price action. Equity futures up 45, call it 46 points on the S&P 500. A bit of a rally this morning off the back of Chairman Powell's interview yesterday evening. A rally also, Tom Keene, in the commodity market. We've talked a little bit about crude, up 10%. And I know you're looking at gold. Gold at $17.64.
I was on the edge of Dennis Garban this morning, John. I looked at gold in dollars, looked at gold in euro and yen as well. Extraordinary lift, really right out to record, depending on what you look at, out to record prices.
It's a brilliant guest coming up right here on Bloomberg Surveillance a little bit later in the hour. Ian Shepardson of Pantheon Macroeconomics on that Chairman Powell interview. A little bit later, Peter Hayes of BlackRock on state finances. A really important conversation later this hour on Bloomberg Surveillance. Alongside Tom Keene, I'm Jonathan Ferro with Lisa Abramovich. We're live.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Influential conversation.
I can find and fund my car, from a Mini to a Jaguar.
Feel good car buying from findandfundmycar.com is the place where you can find quality used cars from trusted dealers rated by you, and where you can fund your car with finance to fit your budget. It's feel good car buying, all in one place.
Shouldn't be a carry on, choose findandfundmycar.com.
If you want to do something important, work in adult social care.
I'm Greg and I lead the team at a residential care home. Supporting people to live life to the fullest, it's an amazing job to have.
We are recruiting in your local area. We need you now, and they need you always. Care for others, make a difference. Today, search adult social care jobs now.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the USwitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures on the rise this morning as major economies show further signs of reopening, and the Fed stressed it has more ammunition to combat a downturn. Gold's trading at its highest price in 7 years, while West Texas oil rises above $30 a barrel for the first time in 2 months as producers in the U.S. and elsewhere continue to cut activity. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 46 points. Dow futures up 403. NASDAQ futures up 129. The DAX in Germany up about 3%. 10-year Treasury down 2/32, yield 0.65%. The yield on the 2-year 0.14%. NYMEX crude oil is up 9 1/3%, up $2.75 at $32.18 a barrel. COMEX gold up 1% or $17.30 at $17.73.70 an ounce. The euro 1.0815 against the dollar. British pound 1.2135 and the yen's at 107.26. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thank you very much. Looking down to Washington now, where on earth do you start, Tom? For me, Pina Navarro to ABC over the weekend, coming out swinging towards China. Now, a lot of people might be listening to this thinking, sure, it's Pina Navarro, you'd expect that. But this one was far more intense than I've heard in quite a while, Tom.
100% agree. Just couldn't. You nailed it. And also, of course, we've got President Xi literally now speaking with English translation to the World Health Organization as well. We bring in our Kevin Cirilli, our Chief Washington correspondent, with 5, 6, 8 things we need to know. We'll see. Kevin, I'm going to cut to the chase. A short, abrupt question. Is there a China policy out of this White House?
Yes, I think that there is, and I think you're seeing it in real time. And to be honest, I was talking with some folks over the last couple of days, and Peter Navarro's comments yesterday are a foreshadowing potentially of what President Trump could say on the campaign trail. We've seen this type of strategy play out, whether it's last week where senior advisors to the president had said in print and television interviews that they wanted more regulations for Chinese firms that are trading on U.S. exchanges, and then the president said that in a Fox Business Network interview. And so I think, quite honestly, you're going to hear, I could foresee this, I'm not predicting, but this is being openly talked about, where the president could take the Navarro rhetoric and amplify that in campaign events.
Well, let's talk about it in terms of policy. You've touched on it a little bit, Kevin. Next policy steps, what are they?
A couple of things. First and foremost, I think you could see a new pushing from the White House to try to get more regulations for Chinese firms trading on U.S. exchanges. I think you could also see legislation, bipartisan legislation, to continue to try to diversify U.S. interests from China, but also, and this is a really big one, this and beyond a Trump administration and into whether it's Biden in 4 years or a different White House if after a Trump second term. And that is this broader notion of trying to get the U.S. Europe to disentangle itself with the United States from China. I think you could see a doubling down of a longer-term interest and a longer-term play in India. You heard a foreshadowing of that from the president's comments as well on Friday, in which he was praising Modi for how Modi has handled this, and that's something I also think you could see as well.
So that is the international focus, Kevin. Turning to the national focus, I'm wondering about how much the discussion is about reopening. President Trump saying that the return of professional sports was essential for the psyche of our country. How close are we?
Well, I think that you look at the news of Apple going to be reopening. I think it's it's dozens of stores over I think it's 25% was the estimate. Don't hold me to that number precisely. But Apple's reopening some stores in states that have reopened, gyms in other states as well towards the end of the month. So I think it's part of this broader American economic psychological argument. You heard this a little bit from Fed Chair Jay Powell's interview with CBS yesterday. But the president feels, confident that sports is a big part of that. It's interesting to see what happened with NASCAR, UFC fighting the head of the UFC league, of course, a big prominent supporter of President Trump. They were able to get rapid tests ahead of the fights. I think it is from the president's perspective incredibly crucial. But from the progressive perspective, it's a bit too much too soon. I'm waiting to see, one, what the Biden campaign does on China, but also how the Biden campaign is going to put out some type of magnified reopening message.
Kevin, how does this play politically? I want you to go real clear politics on me right now. I get China and Huawei, and John mentions Dr. Navarro. I get that. But what's the mix of the politics here within Republican and Democrat and independent parties?
So this I have to be careful, but I think from a conservative ideological perspective in more working class communities around the United States, whether it's Wisconsin, Michigan, parts of Pennsylvania and others, there's going to be this where the health effects of COVID-19 were not as severe as other hotspots in cities throughout the country. There's going to be this cultural debate of, why do these coastal elites want me to wear a mask and shut down my business? And that is incredibly personal to a lot of these towns throughout the country. The president, it's a populist argument to some extent, but the president is tapping right into that. And those communities and those voters are votes that the Democrats need to win because Trump was able to win them in 2016.
It has become so politicized, this reopening, Tom. I think you've put your finger on it. That just in terms of the optics and in terms of the politicization, Kevin, I think, has nailed it. For the Republicans, they're seen as the people that want to get people back to work. And for the Democrats, they're now being seen as the people that want to continue the shutdown. Now, there's very good reasons for arguments on both sides of all of this, particularly on the health side, a huge debate on whether we should be opening much, much more slowly. But just in terms of an election, Kevin, this is what's going to matter, isn't it? People want to get back to work. Unemployment's going to be very high.
It absolutely is. I was having a conversation yesterday with someone in the Washington world, and even Hollywood wants to get back to work. There are a lot of actors and rock stars and musicians who want to get back. They can't do anything. And so it's going to be really interesting to see how that plays out, especially when there's so many structural changes that are happening in real time. And finally, I think now folks, are having these conversations with their friends around the country where parts of it are reopened, parts of it aren't. And just anecdotally, there was a shift in Washington, D.C. I don't know if you guys felt this in New York, but a shift in D.C. over the weekend where you just felt, maybe it was the weather, maybe it's because people have been holed up so much more, where people were much more outdoors. And than they were in the past. Oh, okay, I guess the Steelers felt it too. I guess you guys can relate. I was eating out curbside over the weekend for what it's worth.
Well, I hope you were safe and well. Kevin,
yes,
fantastic to catch up with you. Kevin's already there down in Washington. I'd name a fifth thing to look for, and Lisa touched on it earlier in the programme. Tomorrow, Tom, Chairman Powell in front of the Senate Banking Committee after being, once again, bringing up the need for fiscal, the need for more support, in his words, down in Washington, whether that comes from the Federal Reserve or Congress. And I imagine that's likely to come up tomorrow, too.
It's going to be interesting. And J.P. Morgan with that research over the weekend showing a nascent recovery out there for June. You wonder the timing.
Equity futures, they're positive this morning. Chairman Powell helping us out there. We are positive 46 and up 1.6% from New York. This is Bloomberg.
For the Jewish Communal Fund, Noel Spiegel, former senior partner with Deloitte & Touche and past JCF president, discusses the advantages of a donor-advised fund over a private foundation.
There's a lot involved in having a private foundation. You need to engage attorneys, you need to engage accountants, file tax returns. At JCF, all of that is done for you. You don't have to get involved in anything other than making your contribution to your fund and then determining which grants that you want to make.
A JCF fund may be opened with a minimum $5,000 contribution of cash or appreciated securities and can be used as an alternative to or together with a private foundation.
If you have a foundation, you have to list all of the contributions that you made. Potentially anybody, because the information is public, can find out exactly which organizations a foundation has made charitable contributions to.
Let JCF simplify your philanthropy and protect your privacy. Learn more about JCF's private client group at jcfny.org.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the U-Switch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio, 2 hours out from the opening bell in New York City. We are elevated near session highs on the S&P, up 49 on the S&P 500, positive 1.75%. Muted price action in the bond market. We'll discuss that a little bit later. Yields going nowhere on a 10-year, higher on a 30-year by just a couple of basis points. Elsewhere in foreign exchange, the dollar just showing a little bit of weakness against some of the major currencies, including sterling. Cable up by a little more than 0.1%, even as Andy Haldane over at the Bank of England flirts with negative interest rates. And just to round things out for you, in a commodity market, Tom, WTI up 9%, not just on supply, but demand slowly normalizing in places like China. That is a key move. Yeah. We're at $32 a barrel. I think we were negative that about a month ago.
I want to go there with Ian Shepherdson, but you bring up something, John, we can't let slip by. Mr. Haldane is respected, and he moves sterling. Explain this to our American audience, who Andy Haldane is and why when he talks about negative rates, it matters.
The chief economist of the Bank of England, key figure over at the BOE, Tom, largely considered to be the guy that has the blue sky thinking about what to do with monetary policy. So it's not unusual for me that it was Andy Haldane that was the guy that came out and said, I'm thinking about negative interest rates, we're thinking about it. Though still, to me, I don't see the core of the MPC coming along with this just yet.
Yeah, well, there it is, and we'll continue to follow that as well. As John mentions, on oil up and other things up, all this weekend, there was glide paths and cute little charts beginning to show recovery or attempting to guesstimate the recovery. Ian Shepherdson is expert at discerning this. He's with Pantheon, as I've said many times. They are leading on LinkedIn with the best in charts that you can see out on LinkedIn, and of course their services as well. Ian Shepherdson, there, I guess, is going to be a recovery, and it's going to be modeled. And the most high-frequency of high-frequency recovery data will be claims this Thursday. Are we actually going to see a trend of lower weekly jobless claims?
Yeah, we're already there. I mean, the numbers are still horrendous, obviously, but the trend is decaying by, 10, 12% a week. So I'm hoping this week we might print something like 2.5 million, so down from almost 3 million last week.
Yeah.
Obviously the peak was nearly 7 million, so definitely heading in the right direction. We've seen week after week of incremental declines, but obviously still far too high. I mean, the very worst week after the crash in 2008 was 665,000, and here we are today saying, 2.5 million, that's an improvement. So, all things in context here, it's still terrible.
Ian, a lot of people have been talking about an unprecedented policy response, and a lot of the people who've gotten laid off have been receiving unemployment benefits. There's a question of how big of an additional stimulus package or rescue financing package the market is currently pricing in. What is expected? What is likely, given that $3 trillion plan that Nancy Pelosi got passed in the House but is likely dead on arrival in Senate?
Yes, I mean, everyone knows there's no chance of a $3 trillion package. It'll be somewhere between 0 and 3, so let's do some complicated math and get 1.5. So timing is, of course, everything. I think markets expect that a deal will be done over the next few weeks. I think most people are kind of looking through the posturing on the Republican side in the Senate. They're talking to their base at the moment when they're saying they want to pause and wait and see and be cautious, all this stuff. But the fact is, there's an election coming up, and I don't think these guys can go back to their constituents and say, hey, we voted against that rescue package, and unemployment's still 20%, but vote for me. I mean, that just seems implausible to me, and I think markets believe that's implausible as well. So, yes, a lot of posturing, a lot of grandstanding. There's no chance that whole Democrat wish list will get past the Senate, but I think support for state and local government will, substantial. Their revenues have collapsed and their spending is shot up. They have to be supported. And probably we'll see an extension of the enhanced unemployment benefits beyond July as well, plus extra money for healthcare and some other things. But a substantial package, and it will bring the total amount of support probably in excess of $4 trillion, so which is kind of the order of magnitude that I think is needed. So getting to the right place eventually.
Absolutely incredible numbers. A little bit later this hour, in fact, in around about 10 minutes, we'll catch up with Peter Hayes of BlackRock on state finances. And I think there's a real worry that we could get some state-level austerity over the next couple of years. Is that something you've considered?
Well, it will happen if they're not supported. I mean, that's the point, that it is insane to be using the power of the federal government while at the same time putting states into a position where their lack of support means that they have to cut back on services and raise taxes. I mean, that's completely the wrong thing to do at this point. And again, there's political from the Republican side here, arguing that Democrat states shouldn't be bailed out because they've got big pension deficits, but that's conflating two entirely separate issues. I mean, the fundamental fact is that everywhere revenues have collapsed and everywhere spending has gone up. And the only other fact is that the large Democrat states are the biggest net givers to the federal government under normal circumstances. So it just makes no sense to argue that they shouldn't receive federal largesse now, and they will. It's in no one's interest to put states into a position where they have to tighten fiscal policy. I can't think of anything more mad.
Ian Shepardson, open question. What are you most focused on within the equation? I mean, you're writing for Pantheon. You go down the left column, you go down the right column. What's the part of the GDP equation that matters to you right now?
The big one is the return of consumption, or the speed of the return of consumption.
The speed.
Nearly 70% of GDP. It's the momentum in consumption, which I think varies depending where you look. So, we're clearly seeing an uptick in the states that have opened up. We get daily data on restaurants and air travel, and that's moving in the right direction. But the really big ones, it's the discretionary consumer spending. It's what's going to happen to the auto market and the housing market and consumer spending on durable goods. As people are allowed to go back into retail stores, they haven't spent for the last couple of months. Are they going to go crazy, or are they going to remain cautious? And we just don't know. We got no history that looks anything like this. So we're all in the dark, but I'm quite encouraged by the pickup in restaurant spending and the pickup in air travel. It's down. Air travel is down 90% compared to a year ago, but it was down 97%. So there's been an incremental movement in the right direction. And to me, that suggests people, given the opportunity, are keen to get back out and resume something like normal lives. And that's what has to happen if the economy is to recover.
Well, initially what we'll see is the sequential improvement. Then we have to talk about the limits of the recovery. And that's when the science really comes into it. Some good news just crossing the Bloomberg from Moderna. Experimental vaccine from the company showing promising early signs that it could create an immune system response in the body that could help fend off the coronavirus. This according to sampling of data from a small first human trial of the inoculation. So this is early days, very early days, but promising nevertheless. And Ian, I just wonder from your perspective how you would have to remodel the trajectory of the recovery if science can do its part and do its part a whole lot quicker.
Yeah, well, my base case has always been that there would be a vaccine available by the end of the year in limited quantities, for healthcare workers and vulnerable people, and that it would be available in substantial quantities next spring. Now, if we could bring those numbers forward just by a couple of months, that would make an enormous difference to the trajectory for growth. So I'm very encouraged by that Moderna headline, but they're not the only one, of course, and there's still the Oxford group in the UK that reckons they'll have a vaccine available in commercial quantities as soon as September. Well, I believe that when I see it, but the fact is that we're throwing globally more resources at this vaccine in different places and different methodologies than we've ever seen before, anything like it. So with a bit of luck, one of them will come up with the good. And I think markets are pricing that in as well. I mean, for sure, the S&P wouldn't be where it is now if markets didn't believe that there was going to be a vaccine within a relatively short time frame. But even just 2 or 3 months difference would be a massive deal. Absolutely.
That's exactly where I wanted to go, because we're seeing that equity futures are not up that much on this news, which I thought was surprising, except for, of course, Moderna stock, which is up 16%. But how much is priced in? How much are we priced to perfection, given the expectation of a vaccine in the near term and policy going the right way of the markets?
Well, Fed policy to me is bang on. I'm happy with that. Congress is getting to the right place eventually after, its usual diversions. The progress on reducing the rate of spread of the virus is pretty good. It's mixed, but there's not many states now with rampant outbreaks anymore. So those things are all kind of falling into place. I do think that markets are fully pricing in a vaccine now. And let's say we were to see some headlines over the next few weeks that a bunch of these trials had failed. I mean, that would generate a very rocky few days for markets. No question about that. And I think that tells you that what they're pricing in is a substantial success on the vaccine front before too long. So there is a vulnerability, definitely, if it doesn't happen. Absolutely.
John, this is too much good news. I mean, sooner than that, we're going to see Newcastle beat the Tots. I mean, it's going to be amazing.
Well, they've got money if this deal goes through.
Well, we'll see. Ian Shepardson, thank you so much.
Should probably explain to our listeners what on earth we're talking about.
We're talking about Everyone knows.
Saudi Arabia taking over Newcastle United, which is Ian Shepherdson's team.
You know, I mean, they're going to beat Liverpool here within 6 months. The Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report, brought to you by New Jersey Institute of Technology and the NJ Scholar Corps program, incentivizing residents who attend college out of state to come home and finish their degree in New Jersey. Learn more at njit.edu/NJ Come Home. Here's Bob Moon.
Tom, Jonathan, Lisa, good morning. Here's what's making news in science, technology, engineering, and math. It happened 40 years ago this morning, May 18th, 1980, at 8:32 a.m. local time in the state of Washington. A magnitude 5.1 earthquake announced the eruption of Mount St. Helens and one of the biggest avalanches of debris in recorded history. Geologists making passes over the volcano in a plane that moment witnessed an entire side of the mountain essentially liquefy before it blew away in a huge explosion, ripping 17 miles from the summit in only 3 minutes. Jerry Martin was operating an amateur radio site observing the volcano for Washington's Department of Emergency Services. Jerry Martin signed off as a massive super hot landslide swept toward him. His last transmission was, "It's going to get me too." In all, 57 people were left dead or missing in the path of miles and miles of devastation as volcanic gas and fire shot across the mountain at an estimated 80 miles an hour. The calamity showed suddenly how little scientists really knew about the potential of future volcanic activity in the contiguous United States. The observations of many of those who died that day added to our understanding of volcanoes. That's the Bloomberg NJIT STEM Report. Tom, Lisa, John.
Bob Moon, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Your news, your headlines worldwide now from New York City. Here is Michael Barr.
John, Lisa, Tom, thank you very much. Shops in Italy, markets and museums in Belgium, and beer gardens in Bavaria are reopening. Europe is loosening its coronavirus restrictions. Around the world, there are more than 315,000 deaths from COVID-19. The Trump administration is accusing China of deliberately allowing the coronavirus to spread across the globe after it emerged in Wuhan in December. Bloomberg's Martin DeCarroll reports this new attack comes as world leaders call for an investigation.
White House trade advisor Peter Navarro, a longtime anti-China hardliner, says President Trump did a fine job responding to the virus after the Chinese government deceived the world in an interview with ABC's This Week.
For 2 months, hid the virus from the world and then sent hundreds of thousands of Chinese on aircraft to Milan, New York, and around the world to seed that.
European and Australian leaders are also calling for an investigation, but at today's virtual meeting of the World Health Organization's decision-making body, Chinese President Xi Jinping is expected to say he won't allow an inquiry. In Washington, Martin DeCarroll, Bloomberg Radio.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Lisa, Tom.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Equity futures session highs up 53. We are positive 1.86%. Chairman Powell on limitless stimulus. And then the science. Moderna vaccine in development. It's in development, but in the early stages, early signs of some success. Very early stages, I stress. That's given equity futures a lift. It gives the stock a lift as well. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Moderna up 26% in early trading. From New York, this is Bloomberg Radio.
With a Bloomberg Business of Sports report, I'm Michael Barr. The IOC set aside $800 million for loans and payments arising from the pandemic that forced the 2020 Tokyo Olympics to be postponed. It is still unclear how big the total postponement bill will be, with Olympic organizers and public authorities in Japan facing extra costs. The Russian Soccer League will restart on June 21st after a break of more than 3 months because of the coronavirus. The league intends to pack 8 rounds of games into just over 1 month to finish on July 22nd. All games will be held in empty stadiums. The Cypriot Soccer Federation has called off the season. The decision came after a team of medical experts rejected a set of health protocols drawn up by the federation and insisted that its own guidelines are followed. And that is a Bloomberg Business of Sports report. I'm Michael Barr, brought to you by Marcus, by Goldman Sachs. With a high-yield online savings account, you can money.
Why do hedge funds and other alternative managers rely on Pershing for a highly personalized experience? Mark Alderati, a managing director at BNY Mellon's Pershing and head of Prime Services, explains.
In today's fast-paced environment, where the only constants are change and volatility, you need a prime broker who's both steady and agile, focused on supporting your needs so that you can focus on growing your business and producing results. Exceptional client service and advocating for our clients is at the core of what we do. Our award-winning high-touch team is just one of the benefits of working with BNY Mellon. We help alternative investment managers create great experiences for their clients. Whether it's customized financing, securities lending solutions, platform access, or outsourced trading, BNY Mellon's Pershing is a prime broker who's committed to this business and dedicated to meeting your evolving demands.
To learn more about the unique and industry-leading solutions for hedge funds and other alternative managers, visit Pershing.com. Pershing LLC. Member FINRA, NYSE, SIPC.
Global News 24.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years. Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable! Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. To stay alert, you must remain at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit your contact with other people. If you have to go out, keep your distance from others, 2 meters apart where possible. Continue to wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Max is dreaming of riding a giant chameleon whilst fighting a clan of ninjas. But in reality, he's helping fight COVID-19 in his sleep. Like thousands of others, he's joined the Dream Team. By using the Dream Lab app, they're helping scientists speed up the search for potential treatments.
I'll fight you.
You go, Max. Search Vodafone Dream Lab and join the Dream Team tonight.
Dream Lab app is owned by Vodafone Foundation, an independent charity. Registration number 1089625. Full terms at vodafone.co.uk/dreamlab.
Headlines and breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We're watching shares of Massachusetts-based Moderna. It's up almost 26% in early trading after an experimental COVID-19 vaccine showed promising early signs. U.S. stock index futures are on the rise this morning as major economies show further signs of reopening, and the Fed stressed it as more ammunition to combat a downturn. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 60 points, Dow futures up 521, and NASDAQ futures up 157. The DAX in Germany is up 3.4%. 10-year Treasury down 4/30 seconds, yield 0.65%. The yield on the 2-year 0.14%. NYMEX crude oil is up 8.8% or $2.59 at $32.02 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.7% or $12.80 at $17.69.10 an ounce. The euro 1.0819 against the dollar. British pound 1.2146 and the yen 107.28. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thank you. Thank you very much. Just want to pick up on what Karen was talking about there with Moderna. The stock up by 27% in early trading. I'm very intrigued by this, Tom, because there is going to be huge pressure on anyone that comes up with a vaccine to limit their ability to monetize it. There's going to be massive pressure for whoever comes up with it to give it away. So I'm very intrigued every time I see the stock of any individual company in the news for these reasons up aggressively like this one is this morning.
It's timeless, and it always ends up being a huge political and business discussion. And you know what? It gets worked out, particularly if it's to millions and millions of people. And they'll just have to, I mean, in every crisis we've had on this, back to the 67 cholera outbreak and others, it's always the same. You know, it's you're 100% correct, John. And, at some point here, it gets worked out by negotiation. It's a very delicate thing. And then you see it, John, in the States right now. I saw AstraZeneca will have usage in the United Kingdom first. And, of course, in France, we had I think it was Sanofi uproar because they were going to release in the United. That's a different story. The release in jurisdictions is a really interesting,
Worth pointing out just quickly, Tom, equity futures now session highs up 64. Bit of a breakout in the last 30 minutes off the back of that news, up by more than 2% now.
I'd call it up 40, and then, folks, a new leg up, as John mentions here, up to 24,000, with the VIX coming in well under 30 as well. John and I have really wanted to do this for ages. Peter Hayes is expert on municipal bonds. He runs the municipal bond shop for Mr. Fink over at BlackRock with decades and decades of experience. Let me start with a general question, Peter. Are municipal bonds a value right now? The price cratered, it's come back, but is it still a value where you can pick up total return?
Yeah, good morning, Tom. Thanks for having me. I would say, when you look at it, particularly versus other fixed income asset classes, the total return question is a good one. I think that's how you have to think about municipals now. I think they have their position because of the sell-off that we saw in March and because of the lack of, I would call it maybe Fed intervention to some degree. I don't want to be careful there. They did create the municipal liquidity facility, but they haven't done direct purchases like they have for other asset classes. And because of the credit impact of the economic downturn, munis are lagging on the rebound. So they've done well in recent sessions. Month to date, they're up 1.9%. But if you're looking at it from a holistic portfolio standpoint, there is some total return value. And the other thing we think of just long term is just income. I mean, taxes, hard to see taxes going down here given all the fiscal stimulus.
Peter, just looking at the landscape here, there's a lot of discussion about a need for rescue financing from Washington, D.C. to bail out a lot of these municipalities. The reason why bonds have sold off so much and yields are is where they are currently. What is required in terms of the total number coming out of Washington to support states' budgets and prevent a vast rash of failures on the local side?
Yeah, that's a really tough question, just because even though we see all these attempts at reopening, will they be successful? Will they be reopening at 100%? Will revenues bounce back to where they were pre-COVID? There's all these questions. So suffice to say the number's a big one. We've seen states already talk about some of the holes and their gaps and their, in totality, hundreds of billions of dollars. So it is a big number. They've done a lot in a lot of different formats. And then we saw the bill introduced last week for the $3 trillion number, which a lot of that is geared towards states and cities. I think one of the things you said at the end, though, is interesting about, preventing failure. And this is an issue really of liquidity versus solvency. States and cities can't go bankrupt. Cities technically can in 26 of the 50 states, I think it is. There's some mechanism. It's difficult. States cannot. So there's been some rhetoric about potentially some of the weaker pension states defaulting or going bankrupt. There is no mechanism for that. So I think it really becomes liquidity. How do you solve this liquidity issue, this big shortfall in revenues over a period of time? The municipal liquidity facility that the Fed created is a backstop for that. Should the issuers need it, remember they have to provide basic services. That's their sole purpose. And so the intent of the backstop is to help states and cities to do that. But longer term, what will the numbers look like in November? Will the economy kind of come roaring back, or is it going to be a slow grind forward? And the slower it is and the longer it is, the bigger that gap is going to be, the more help that will be needed from Washington. But suffice to say, it's hundreds of billions of dollars at this point in time.
Peter, I'll say forgive me up front because this is not a direct apples-to-apples comparison, of course, but in Europe, in the financial debt crisis of 2011-2012, there was a clear divide between core Europe and peripheral Europe. Do you see anything similar emerging just in terms of red states, blue states in the coming years?
So I'd say yes, this is the short answer, and to some degree I think we already see that. So if you look at what the Fed has done by buying corporates, mortgage-backed securities, treasuries, it makes me wonder to some degree whether one of the reasons they haven't bought munis more directly is it's a big market, bigger than people think, very complex with, depending on how you look at it, 75,000 different issuers, et cetera. So how you go about that is difficult. But I think a big part of the problem is the red versus the blue. When you look at kind of issuance, you look at the coast versus middle America, And I think this is part of the difficulty. You even see the rhetoric around the $3 trillion stimulus package introduced on Friday. It does become a bit of a red state, blue state, and I think that ultimately can be a bit of an impediment. There's a lot of things that have to take place here. There's sort of infrastructure spending, there's creating jobs, there's helping make up the shortfall in revenues that Lisa had asked about. So there's all these elements that have to get solved, and we do wonder whether the political difficulty of this gets in the way. We obviously have an election later this year, so we'll see how that turns out. So we might not get a lot of these issues resolved in 2020. They might drag on into 2021, depending on what the outcome of the election is and the political landscape looks like.
Peter Hayes, fantastic to catch up with you, sir. Appreciate your time and your insight on a really important issue. Peter Hayes there of BlackRock on red states, blue states, and Tom Keene, that's going to be a key feature of things for the next few months.
We don't do enough on this, and I tell you, John, coast to coast, the muni landscape, there's just so many different issues, so many different expertise. I just looked up the town of Swellesley, Massachusetts, John. This is a small bedroom community outside of Boston. I assume you're not familiar with it, John. And you know, the yield is like next to nothing. It's like Switzerland. I'm going to start crying, and people won't know why. Equity futures up 64. We're up a little more than 2%. I'm sure Wellesley are very happy they got a mention this morning. This is Bloomberg.
Have you? At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years. Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable! Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. To stay alert, you must remain at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit your contact with other people. If you have to go out, keep your distance from others, 2 meters apart where possible. Continue to wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
I've used my ample time indoors to hunt down my odd socks. I found one down the sofa, one in the bread bin, and one in a serious relationship with my cat. But there are better ways to spend your time. That's why Money Supermarket is helping you find cheaper insurance, better interest rates, and easier ways to manage your bills. You can find many more small steps towards money care at Money Supermarket.
Did you know that with TuneIn's local radio feature, you can stream live FM and AM stations broadcasting in your area? Discover local news, talk, and music stations. Navigate to the local radio section under Browse to listen locally on TuneIn.
Let's be honest, we all spend too much of our day on social media. But at least you can spend your endless scroll time to discover new things on TuneIn. Follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to always be in the know about the best new stuff streaming in the app. From breaking news stories and live sporting events.
Yeah, but it's unique times. I think there's unique circumstances, and we're trying
to stand out stations and podcasts. Stay in touch with TuneIn.
Talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
Certainly, we've got to put a floor under the economic carnage.
Markets didn't believe the coronavirus would take down the world economy.
Finance.
The sellers are not necessarily finished, but quite exhausted.
Investment.
That's the reality that we have to settle ourselves to. This is the start of a depression.
We're going to have a bounce back when everything is open. The question is, what is the shape of the economy from there?
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene, Jonathan Farrell, and Lisa Abramowitz on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. John Farrell, Lisa Abramowitz, and Tom Keene. We welcome all of you to Bloomberg Surveillance. A Monday, a new week out there, and it is a week of risk on, an exceptionally constructive feel to the markets. This morning, we welcome all of you coast to coast, Sirius XM, Channel 119 in Washington and Boston. Good early morning, San Francisco, and a particular good morning to all of you at Bloomberg 1130 in New York. John, futures up 40, suddenly become futures up 70. Dow futures up 610 points. The VIX in almost three big figures, 29.11. It's more than just Chairman Powell's speech, 60 Minutes visit, isn't it?
The two pillars of support. The first one being Chairman Powell's interview yesterday evening. The second, the science on the Moderna side of things, Tom. This is the improvement in the last hour or so. It comes from news on an experimental vaccine, according to a sampling of data from a small first human trial of the inoculation, and some promising signs. Early days, but promising, and I think we'll take that promising scientific hope this morning. It gives futures a lift, it gives Moderna a lift as well. Yeah. The stock up by around about 25%.
John Farrell, folks, driving futures up another 10 points, up 71 points right now. Dow futures up 619 points. Although John Farrell doesn't quote the Dow, Lisa Abramowitz looks at the bond market, and she would note yields higher. You mentioned, Lisa, bonds really not coordinated in with all this equity good feeling.
Yeah, although right now you are seeing yields tick higher at our session highs in tandem with the lift in stock prices. Remember, though, bond yields up. That means that prices go down, which will be interesting. If we continue to get this good news, what does that mean for that 20-year bond auction on Wednesday? Will there be less demand for it, leading to higher costs for the U.S. government to borrow?
Oil moving so much, folks. Oil, 32 American oil. John Farrell, 34 rounded up. $35 on Brent crude. Oil crisis over?
Impressive move. I wouldn't say it's over just yet, but demand's starting to normalise, not just supply cuts. That's the important thing this morning, I think, out of China. Some reporting that we've done that demand is getting back to pre-COVID levels, and that is really important for a commodity market, a complex that has been absolutely battered through this year.
It is interesting to see, folks, and of course we've seen this in a number of these weeks. Monday, Tuesday with good news, up we go, and then there's some challenges through the week, and we'll be with you all through the week to give you perspective on that. We've talked to many different guests that have a cross-section of knowledge, and one of those would be Stephen Englander out of Yale University, and of course on Wall Street for years with a Standard Chartered Bank. And Dr. Englander, of course, looking at foreign exchange, but decidedly through an international economic prism as well. Stephen, any number of research pieces over the weekend tried to gauge out the gentle curve of recovery that could be there. Does Standard Chartered observe a global recovery?
Well, we think we're close to the bottom. We're cautious on how fast things are going to pick up. Obviously the vaccine news is positive, but, the risk that we have a second wave, and especially viral vaccines, are not perfect in terms of their ability to restrain disease. So I'd say we think that there's going to be a pickup. We're cautious on how fast it's going to be. But we also acknowledge some of the numbers coming out of Asia are actually looking pretty good. You mentioned the oil numbers. Some of the trade numbers overnight were also pretty strong.
The depth of the downturn, Steve, is something you've been working on, and you came up with an unemployment rate that was north of what I was considering. Can you just tell our audience how you've constructed unemployment something closer to 30% in the United States?
The thing is that you start with the BLS number of 23 million. Prior to the COVID virus, we've been having, million and a half workers enter the labor force. Then you had 10 million drop out, saying that they're not in the labor force, and 10 million jobs disappeared. To me, that's most likely that they lost jobs as opposed to deciding that they didn't want to work anymore. And then in the BLS's way they phrased the questions, there seemed to be a lot of people who said they were working who were actually not working. They weren't at the office, they weren't getting paid. BLS says they think they're unemployed. So you add all of that together and you're easily north of 25.
So when you talk about these astronomical figures of unemployment rates in the United States, the highest since the Great Depression, possibly rivaling those, there's a question about asset prices, stocks moving higher in spite of this. And I'm just wondering how much the policy response, Fed Chair Powell saying that it is unlimited with respect to what they can do on the asset purchase side, et cetera, how much does that offset anything in the unemployment rate, the real economy that you're seeing?
I think it does offset a lot. He's doing as much as monetary policy can do. Weirdly enough, I think the fact that he's sort of nixed negative interest rates for now is helping the market because, it means that were he to say that they were contemplating negative interest rates, you'd probably see bank stocks tank. In addition, obviously, we have oil doing well because we use out of China. So, we have techs doing well, we have oil doing well, and we have banks looking like they might do a little bit better. It's some support. I mean, there's segments that are weak. I think what's also important is that the market may be thinking that we can do an end around some of the weaker sectors and services. We watch movies at home. We don't go to the theater. We're paid to watch sporting events from our living rooms. We won't go to the arenas. We'll lose jobs, and those jobs will be gone, but the sort of demand might still be there.
Stephen, with all of your experience, what this comes down to is a belief that the major institutions will provide the sustenance to get us to the other side. Where's your other side? I mean, Chairman Powell's clearly modeling 2021. Our Carl Riccadonna at Bloomberg Economics is courageously out to 2022. Where do we get back to normal in the Stephen Englander universe?
I think it's going to be a long time. Look, if it is the case that we don't have a perfect vaccine or we don't have a perfect therapy, and we continue to be nervous about social distancing for an extended period, there are a lot of jobs that won't reappear. And so there could be a lot of unemployed people for a long, long time, but it doesn't mean that demand will disappear. And so I think that we're facing this combination of activity may be restored quicker than, many people think, but at the same time, there will be this lump of unemployment, that will be very, very hard to eliminate.
It sounds like someone's washing up, and I'm sure Tom Keynes never washed up in his life. I'm trying to work out who's doing it.
Oh, the door's open again into the West Wing.
Is that what happened?
Yeah, it's 2 doors through.
Well, I started questioning, Tom, the idea of you washing up.
The help you get nowadays
is something I can't get my head around.
The help you get nowadays is just, they won't close the doors when they're working in the kitchen.
Well, maybe you should ask politely. I mean, Tom's cooked me breakfast a few times. I've been over for breakfast and watched the football, but I've never seen him wash up. That would be a new one. Steve, just to round things out and quickly move on and get your thoughts on foreign exchange. Everything you've said, Tom Keynes washing up removed from that conversation. Everything you've said makes it sound quite difficult for this dollar to sell off in that environment.
I'd say the opposite, actually.
What's that, Steve?
The market seems to be very long dollars. We've done some research that suggests that the market is long dollars. You see the way the dollar behaved last week, where even when markets were selling off, it had trouble advancing, and when we had some good news, the dollar's, getting creamed today. It looks like the market's short dollars. The other thing is that the strongest correlate has been activity risk appetite. And I think what it tells you is that the main demand for dollars is precautionary. And if it turns out that we don't need as many dollars as there are out there, I think the willingness to hold dollars will disappear. So it's actually dollar negative, not necessarily against the euro and against the yen, who have their own problems. But if we're looking at the commodity currencies, if we're looking at EM, it's actually a pretty good story for them.
Really? So you're bullish on EM right now?
Yeah, well, look, assuming that things go right, that we do have some recovery and that risk appetite gets restored, that the VIX doesn't trade at 30, it trades in a normal level, I think that's a very positive story for the currencies that were sold off heavily and have only partially recovered.
Stephen Englander, thank you so much. Greatly appreciate it. With the Standard Chartered Bank. With our news in New York City, here's Michael Barr.
Tom, Lisa, John, thank you very much. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell said a U.S. economic recovery may stretch deep into next year. Powell on CBS's 60 Minutes says a lot depends on how confident consumers and investors are.
Assuming there's not a second wave of the coronavirus, I think you'll see the economy recover steadily through the second half of this year. For the economy to fully recover, people will have to be fully confident, and that may have to await the arrival of a vaccine.
Texas saw its highest single-day increase in coronavirus cases on Saturday, and health officials say many of the cases are from meat-packing plants. The mayor of Austin, Texas, Steve Adler, says the numbers make him take pause.
We know for an absolute certainty that as you increase physical interactions between people, you are going to increase the number of new cases. It just happens. That's why everybody's staying at home. Shut this thing down. The question is, are those new cases going to come at such a rate and such a pace that we're put on a path to overload our hospitals? That's what we can't let happen, and that's why we have to watch these numbers daily.
Meanwhile, gyms and health clubs in Texas are reopening. Tropical Storm Arthur, the first named storm in the Atlantic for 2020, will bring high surf, heavy rains, and strong winds to the coast of North Carolina. As of early this morning, Arthur is churning off the coast of Georgia and South Carolina with sustained winds of 45 miles an hour. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John, Lisa, Tom.
Michael, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Here's your price action. Session highs. We advance a little bit more, up by 74 points on the S&P 500, up by 2.6%. An experimental vaccine from Moderna showing early signs of success. I emphasize early signs, but that gives us an additional leg higher off the back of a very constructive interview from Chairman Powell. That sounded like a champagne cork.
No, that's exactly what I thought.
Are you drinking now?
No, I went in the kitchen, John, and
what did you
I yelled at the help.
And they brought you champagne.
They brought me champagne out. I said, that's the kind of help we have here. I went in the kitchen. I yelled at them. They really got mad. One of them threw a bottle at me, and it broke, and then they gave me another one. So
it's
I said, why not?
8 a.m.
But let me do the math. It's 5 p.m. for Francine Lacroix.
Oh, so you're on Francine time?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you got your math wrong a little bit anyway. I think it's midday in London. I think it's 1:12.
That's what happens after a bottle of champagne.
Actually, we should celebrate seriously, John and Lisa. I mean, what a difference the weekend was over the last 8 weeks. I mean, it's really extraordinary.
No one's listening. How often do you do this? When we're doing the show, do you have a beverage of your choice?
I don't.
No one's listening. It's okay. Just tell us all. Do you usually kick back about 7:30, 8 a.m.?
I will say,
time on TV.
Tom, it was a beautiful weekend.
It was a beautiful
I will entertain you.
Why do I feel like I'm not part of this? Are you both having a drink?
Because we're in Central Park.
Morning?
The two of us are. Hi, Lisa. I'm waving at you across Central Park. Good morning. Because we're in Central Park, where it's peaceful, and people were really seriously socially distancing, John. It was amazing to see it laid out as perfectly as it was. John, could you do a data check for us?
Yeah, I'd love to. I'm 76 on the S&P 500. We rallied 2.65% from New York for our audience worldwide. This really is Bloomberg Surveillance Live on Bloomberg Radio.
Not completing high school is more of a social thing than it was an academic thing. I came out in the 11th grade. Nobody was embracing you. The kids were cruel. It was very difficult to be gay. Even though all these years have passed, I still had that longing to have my diploma. The hard part was determining that I was going to do it, but I definitely didn't do it alone.
At age 30, with the help of her mentor, Carissa finished her high school diploma.
I have a mentor, Maria. She convinced me to continue my education and to finish what I started to get my diploma. Just never judges. She's a true role model. If you're even considering getting your high school diploma, go get it. You can do it.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their business strategically. Yet, the most competitive managers in the market know, with the right partner and a flexible operating platform, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seizechange.
If you want to do something important, work in adult social care.
I'm Greg and I lead the team at a residential care home. Supporting people to live life to the fullest, it's an amazing job to have.
We are recruiting in your local area. We need you now, and they need you always. Care for others. Make a difference. Today. Search adult social care jobs now.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the USwitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
And breaking news 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. We continue to watch shares of Massachusetts-based Moderna. They're up about 28% this morning after an experimental COVID-19 vaccine showed promising early signs. Futures are higher this morning. NYMEX crude oil above $30 a barrel. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up 75 points. Dow futures up 665. And NASDAQ futures up 187. The DAX in Germany's up 3.8%. 10-year Treasury down 5.30 seconds, yield 0.65%. Yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is up 8.6%, up $2.54 at $31.97 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.25% or $4.20 at $17.60.40 an ounce. The euro 1.0831 against the dollar. British pound 1.2154 and the yen at 107.38. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom, John, and Lisa.
Karen, thank you. Thank you very much. Really important development this morning that we haven't talked much about. It's in China and it's around oil demand. Our team reporting that Chinese oil demand is all but back to pre-COVID levels. That is important as we look for demand to start to normalize, Tom.
And John, little micro stories that really drive forward the discussion. And of course, President Xi speaking of the World Health Organization, and of course the NPC conference beginning to get underway in China. Always a real symbolic moment for his leadership as well. This is our interview of the day on China. Freya Beamish with Pantheon. Freya, let me just start with a basic question. What is the GDP run rate right now of China?
Well, at the moment, we're looking at a pretty
close, actually, to what it's hard for me to even say those words. It's pretty close to what the authorities have been reporting in Q1 at least. So we did see a big drop quarter on quarter, and we saw a big drop year over year as well. And the authorities actually came close to coming clean on what that was. I wouldn't get too comfortable with that position of kind of telling the truth, because in the second half of the year, the reality is that the recovery is likely to underperform, and coming into the two sessions that we have, we'll have announcements hopefully at the end of this week as to what targets might be. Coming into that, it's likely that we're going to start to see more flexibility around those growth targets. And that we might even see a 2-year target being set. So that's going to make things anyway. We're not going to see such a strong signal from the Chinese authorities. And in any case, what we can extrapolate from, even if there is a 2-year target, with regards to 2020, is probably going to be higher than what we're going to see in reality. So for this year overall, the Q1 data was such that it's very hard to see how they could recover and get a growth of GDP this year. So we think actually that we're going to see a contraction to the tune of about 2% for this full year. They're unlikely to report that, as I said, but the reality is that they'll probably they could actually over-report so they could actually under-report next year. What's missing in Chinese GDP is volatility. So they could say growth is higher than it actually is in reality this year, and next year they would under-report.
Freya, trying to game out what to believe from China, what not to believe, which data points to take has been something of a cottage industry for a lot of individuals. I'm wondering, there was a story on the Bloomberg terminals today saying that Chinese oil demand is nearly back to levels seen before the national lockdown that Beijing imposed to prevent the outbreak from spreading. I'm trying to understand how important, if this is accurate, how much this is a tell of the economy getting back online versus just the fact that people are using their own cars more than public transportation, for example, simply because they don't want to be in a crowded place.
Yeah, there could be a bit of that, but looking at the industrial production data overall, that in total is almost back to Q4 levels. So this goes back to what we were talking about earlier in terms of this dual track recovery. Whereby the industrial complex is kind of powering back and really looks like a V-shaped recovery, and does seem like it's getting back to kind of Q4 levels rather almost surprisingly. But that's very much supported by the fulfillment of previous export orders, and also by liquidity provision for inventory build in the first part of this quarter. Now, the external demand story is very fast going to drop away from the support from the external demand is going to drop away very quickly from that story as we go further into Q2. And it's a big ask for these state-owned enterprises that are overstretched in terms of debt to continue just pumping out production to boost inventory when the outlook is so uncertain. At the moment, we still think there will be a good, strong recovery in Q3 in the rest of the world, and then China would be able to shift some of that inventory. But at the moment, things are still very uncertain.
Trust and transparency, two issues that just aren't going anywhere. And you're not the only guest that comes on this program who can't trust the data seemingly coming out of China. The government and the trust here in the United States of the Chinese Communist Party has clearly broken down again. I'm not sure if it was ever really built back up. There are questions about transparency all the times, not just from the United States, also from Europe, Australia, and elsewhere too. Where is this heading, Freya? I'm trying to get my hands around where this is heading. I'm hearing so much from Washington, from Democrats, from Republicans on what they think of this Chinese Communist Party. Words and policy are often two different things. Can you talk to me about where this is heading, just in terms of policy?
Yeah, well, our forecasts at the moment are kind of banked on relations between China and the U.S. or I shouldn't say remaining because they're not in a good place at the moment, but on the assumption that things have been so bad in the first half of the year that any kind of reasonable politician, and we're just hoping that politicians can be reasonable enough, wouldn't want to derail the recovery in the second half by kind of throwing a spanner in the works of global trade. That's not what we really hear at the moment. But the thing is, at the moment, all global economies are in a lot of pain. And the best thing to do, or not the best thing in a moral sense, but one of the best policies, strategies, in that case is from somebody else, and to point the finger at somebody else. So it's kind of understandable that at this stage in the game we would be seeing kind of uncomfortable noises coming from both sides. But when the reality of the situation comes through, and there's the actual prospect of a recovery in the second half, it seems unlikely, I'm willing to eat my words, but it seems unlikely that people would want to derail that in the second half.
Freya, thank you. Freya Beamish of Pantheon Macroeconomics. Tom, I assume you've got something to say. What is it?
I was just, a little confused.
Literally, I've got one segment left with you this morning. I cannot wait to get it done. Equity futures up 77 with positive 2.7%. It's a wrench, right, from New York, this. Bloomberg Radio.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Elite advisory firms rely on BNY Mellon's Pershing to meet the needs of their most complex clients. Karen Novak, Chief Operating Officer at Pershing Advisor Solutions, explains how.
At BNY Mellon's Pershing, we bring customized insights and strategies to help you grow your advisory business and stay on the leading edge. We can support the needs of your most sophisticated clients with a full range of investment and wealth management solutions, from access to private banking to consolidated bank and brokerage custody. Learn why so many of the largest advisory firms turn to us for the financial strength and high-touch service that BNY Mellon's Pershing can provide. Are you well positioned to stand out from your competition?
Learn more at Pershing.com or call 800-445-4467. Brokerage custody provided by Pershing LLC and other services provided by Pershing Advisor Solutions LLC. Both members of FINRA and SIPC. Private banking and bank custody provided by BNY Mellon NA. Member FDIC.
This is a Bloomberg Money.
If you want to do something important, work in adult social care.
I'm Greg and I lead the team at a residential care home. Supporting people to live life to the fullest. It's an amazing job to have.
We are recruiting in your local area. We need you now, and they need you always. Care for others. Make a difference. Today. Search adult social care jobs now.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable! Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be kept. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
From New York City, this is Bloomberg Surveillance for our audience worldwide. We're live on Bloomberg Radio, 60 minutes away from the opening bell in New York. Perception is everything, and this morning people feel a little bit better. A supportive Chairman Powell giving equity futures a lift. We're up 80. We are positive 2.8%. An experimental vaccine from Moderna showing early signs of success, driving us an extra leg higher. And in the commodity market, crude catching a bigger bid. WTI up by 9%. Brent crude up by 6%, $34 and around about 50 cents there as we start to see demand normalize in places like China. Some constructive news this Monday morning, Tom.
No question, John. I really want to emphasize to people through the morning up 40, then up 60, and as John mentions now, SPX futures up 81 points, 2.8%. As you all know, it is the most horrendous job economy of our generations. But what will it mean for wages? Tom Porcelli joins right now with RBC Capital Markets. Tom, I've heard very little discussion of what this means for wages. What does it mean?
I think you've heard very little conversation about that because it's wholly unclear what it means from a wages perspective. I mean, you know, one of the things that we talked about, myself and the three of you, was right after the payroll report. If you looked at that payroll number and the wage gains that we witnessed within it, I mean, that number was, you know, sort of bogus in the context of the only reason why it rose is because it was basically, you know, more higher paying jobs were the last to get dinged. So I don't know that you can really draw any sweeping conclusions from what's going to happen from a wage perspective. I mean, the one thing that we know right now is that for the vast majority of people that have been laid off thus far, you know, they're earning 120% of their prior income. That's obviously a very significant amount of money. It could act as a boost in the immediate term if the recovery really does start to sort of gather some momentum. You know, there's some signs that we are gathering momentum. I don't know if it's going to be enough for the 120% of income that these people are earning to really make a difference from an economic perspective. But at a minimum, it acts as a sort of a cushion if this does go on a little bit longer.
But if we have the weight to wages of some form, how does that fold into the overall inflation matrix? I mean, you and I have all read, you know, middle 20th century England and how terrible it was, et cetera, et cetera. No one's predicting that. I get that. But what's it actually mean if we have this labor compression, and what does it mean then for the disinflation trend?
So here's what I would say. I would say strip away the notion of wage pressures driving inflation for the sort of the immediate term to even maybe the sort of the midterm. And instead, here's what I would focus on as it relates to inflation. Making the call disinflation in the immediate term, that's easy. You know, my 6-year-old son could probably come up with that same conclusion. You know, in an environment where aggregate demand is really slowing down pretty dramatically, you know, again, it's easy to make that call. I think the much more intellectually interesting conversation as it relates to inflation in the medium to long term is what happens to supply chains. Because if you see a supply chain shift, right, I think we all appreciate that right now the goods supply chain basically starts in China. If you start to see that shift, the origination point shift out to other countries, and let's be clear, I'm not talking about this because of COVID-19. The trade war put the wheels in motion on that. And there are obviously, you know, countless companies that have started the process of moving the supply chain out of China. If you start to onshore even a small percentage of those to the industrial world, then all of a sudden the goods prices, the conversation there is very different. Let's be clear. Over the course of the last, 20, 30 years, we've been in perpetual disinflation from a goods price perspective.
Yeah.
Services inflation, of course, has just been chugging along at a 2.5% to 3% pace. So if all of a sudden you take that, what has basically been a zero or something negative, and you make it slightly positive, then all of a sudden you're talking about a totally different inflation dynamic. I think this is the part of the conversation that no one is talking about, and probably because it's just too far out. Right? I mean, this is not a near-term dynamic. I mean, this is something that will take place over the course of the next several years.
What is homeschooling like with Master Porcelli right now? At 6 years old, you're modelling the demand side and inflation forecast.
You're not inflicting microeconomics on your children, are you?
So I'll tell you a funny, sad story. So my son Preston, who I adore in every way, he comes into this little makeshift office that I've created for myself. And he pops in and he loves the eco screen, right? The Bloomberg WEI screen.
Smart kid.
So do my kids.
Yeah, and look, let's be clear. He loves it because it flashes a lot of colors, right? I mean, he's 6. So anyway, one of the things that he has observed over this was last week. And over recent weeks, he's observed that the change column, the day change column, has been mostly green. But then he's also observed that the column on the far right, the year-to-date column, has just still been red. And so I'm trying to teach him about this stuff, and I basically say to him, look, you'll know when things are a little bit better when the year-to-date column gets green. Now, of course, we all know it's more complex than that, but I'm just trying to simplify a complex idea to a 6-year-old. So he walks into my office. This was, I guess, the week before last. Look, right when the NASDAQ went into green on the year-to-date column, he walks in, and with a voice of utter surprise that sort of shocked me, he said, "Wow, Daddy," he calls it the NASDAQ. Wow, Daddy, look, the NAS is green year to date. I'm going back to school. I was like, it was so sad and funny and impressive. I mean, anyway, that's
smart kid.
We could get him a job in the administration somewhere.
Yeah. Well, Tom, honestly, I was actually talking about economics with my 11-year-old son this weekend, and we were talking about inflation, and we were talking about why if the government prints a lot of money, it doesn't necessarily mean that there is going to be a lot of inflation. This had to do, of course, with Fed Chair Powell saying that he can simply create more money by electronically adding it. And I'm wondering, at what point velocity of money ends up being the main conversation again as it plunges, because no one has anything to spend on because everyone's staying at home.
I agree with that, and with that sort of the basis of that comment. I mean, I think what we have to keep in mind is, look, with all due respect to the monetarists out there, I mean, I think the one thing that we should have learned during the financial crisis was that the monetarist playbook, it's not that it's broken, it's that it could be somewhat flawed. The thought process is somewhat flawed, right? I mean, if you think about the financial crisis, I think people were waiting for this massive inflationary impulse to kick in, and of course it never did. And so that, of course, naturally begged the question why. And the why is because if the transmission mechanism from the banking system, which is really the conduit for monetary policy, is either broken or disabled, or there's some sort of roadblocks in the way, then that conduit, right, the banking system, it's not going to be able to flush out all of that stimulus into the hands of the end user. And that's exactly what happened during the financial crisis. So I think the whole notion that we need to see some sort of potential big inflationary impulse down the road on the back of what the Fed is doing today, I think that's an incomplete idea.
But isn't the great challenge of the monetarist theory, just in a broad sense, is it pushes up against solo in growth, which is change in technology? Do you assume, Tom Porcelli, that out of this pandemic, this generational crisis, that we've all learned about change in technology, and that's going to fold right in here to diminish inflation fears?
So I think that productivity can almost always save the day. I mean, this is one thing we've talked about with regard to many of the sort of challenges that face us that have nothing to do with COVID-19. I mean, I think what people have to keep in mind is, we have this entitlement challenge. I'm not going to call it a problem. We have an entitlement challenge down the road where we're getting older, right, as a nation, and this is not unique to the United States. Exactly. This is not unique to the United States. This is really the sort of a challenge the world over. And one of the things we drew this out in a note that we wrote a while back. One of the things that could save the day is a sort of a boom from a productivity perspective. I mean, that could help put a floor underneath what otherwise would be a very sort of steady decline in trend rates of growth. So, look, we're always been big believers in productivity as being able to sort of really come in and prop up the broader backdrop. But you need the right pieces in place for that to happen. And of course, in the current backdrop, it's really hard to see that unfold.
Tom, great to catch up with you. Can we do a shout out for Preston Porcelli? And I think the NAS should catch on. I think that's
the NAS.
I like the NAS. I think that works. That works for me. Tom Porcelli, and a shout out to Preston. Fantastic work. Of RBC Capital Markets, the chief US economist. What are you guys doing to your kids? Master Abramovich studying the velocity of money.
We were discussing that this weekend.
Preston Porcelli looking at valuations on the NASDAQ.
This ends. Okay, this ends.
Well, I mean, come on.
Afterthought doesn't care about the Bloomberg terminal just as long as Dad stays employed. All that matters right now is moving up 2 or 3 levels in bed wars.
Is that what? That's all what that matters? Is that a game?
That's all that matters.
Bed Wars.
It's Minecraft. It's Microsoft.
Oh right, okay.
It's like the weather.
And you call it Bed Wars because the kids won't go to bed. Is that right?
No, it's a game. It's a part of Minecraft.
Oh, that's actually a game.
And I'm at sleepy level, and she's up at insomniac. She's like killing me.
Your kids.
Her ratio of kills to deaths is like phenomenal.
Equity futures up 81. We're positive 2.8%. A lot of news to get through. With your news, your headlines worldwide from New York. Here is Michael Barr.
John, Lisa, Tom, thank you very much. Chinese President Xi Jinping says China will provide $2 billion over 2 years to help with the response to the coronavirus pandemic. Xi's announcement by video conference at the start of the World Health Organization's annual assembly marks a sharp contrast to the United States. The Trump administration has announced a suspension of its funding for WHO over allegations of mishandling the outbreak and praise of China's response. Almost all U.S. states have loosened restrictions in place to help curb the spread of the virus. Some began allowing limited gatherings, while others have allowed restaurants and some businesses to reopen their doors with caution. Former Homeland Security Advisor for President Trump, Tom Bossert, warns Americans that we're not out of the woods with COVID-19 just yet.
This is just an end to the shelter-in-place rules, but we still need to make sure we continue all the other rules, not only washing your hands and wearing masks, but also trying our best to identify new cases.
Global news 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts, more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. John.
Michael Barr, thank you, sir. Thank you very much. Chairman Powell with some supportive words in an interview yesterday evening with 60 Minutes, happened to give this equity market a lift. Tom, I just got the feeling, though, and I hate to be overly critical, don't we have a Federal Reserve that's trying to talk out of both sides of its mouth at the moment? We're ready to do more on the one hand. Then on Friday, talking about financial market valuations and vulnerabilities to the downside. Yeah. Now, if you're wondering why markets have got away from fundamentals, then the Federal Reserve has got a massive role to play in that. And if you're sitting there Sunday evening saying, we're ready to do more and there are no limits of what we can do with these lending programs, why are you surprised in a financial stability report? Why even do the financial stability report?
Yeah, there's no question about it. But, John, what I would say is I see it in every major central bank worldwide, including reading the British papers, and that they're all, the central bank is right now the institution of last resort. And that's clearly been his messaging, including on 60 Minutes last night. And there's no question about that. And that's where you see this lift this morning is he is speaking and he is directing.
And if we don't get a lift in the economy anytime soon and this market stays where it is, we will have the conversation we've had for the last 10 years, which is widening wealth inequality.
Yes, no question about that. There's not enough talked about that right now. Absolutely.
Futures up 82, Tom. We advanced by 2.9%. A few pillars of support, demand for oil normalizing in China, an experimental vaccine from Moderna actually showing some signs of success, and a supportive Chairman Powell giving this equity market a lift. From New York, this is Bloomberg.
This is your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini. Watch for some more bad numbers on the housing market. Michelle Meyer, head of U.S. Economics at Bank of America, says housing starts may fall 50% from their peak, but not stay that horrible.
Once you start to see some recovery come back, those numbers will come back quickly as well. So it's very much going to follow the broader cycle.
And Meyer says the government programs that allow mortgage holders to skip monthly payments for up to a year are among the things that will help housing levitate in some areas.
Nationally, we're looking for, somewhere around 2-3% decline on a year-over-year basis with very deep bifurcations in the market. If you're in big urban centers, clearly the outlook looks more problematic.
Meyer says home prices will likely take a hit in those crowded metro areas, but rise in the suburbs. And we'll be getting numbers on housing starts, building permits, and existing home sales later this week. And that's your Bloomberg Real Estate Report. I'm Denise Pellegrini.
Jenny Liss, Jewish communal leader and philanthropist, talks about why she chose the Jewish Communal Fund for her family's charitable giving.
For a lot of people, it would be the convenience factor. I don't have to track anything.
If charitable giving is an important part of your life, JCF can help you organize your philanthropy with our donor-advised fund. A fund can be established with a minimum tax-deductible contribution of $5,000. Make grants to your favorite charities, and JCF handles all the administration and reporting.
At the year end, our board awards community grants from fees and endowment income to UJ's annual campaign. We also make gifts to specific organizations, the elderly, Holocaust survivors, the hungry. The fact that we come together as a community at the end of the year to build community, that's what makes us different.
Get better at giving back. To find out more about JCF's impact, visit jcfny.org and download the Giving Report. JCF, we have a gift for giving.
Connecting to...
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you can win 10 grand every month for 30 years. Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable! Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. To stay alert, you must remain at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit your contact with other people. If you have to go out, keep your distance from others. 2 meters apart where possible. Continue to wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures extending gains after an experimental vaccine showed promising early signs of helping to fend off the new coronavirus. Crude oil is rising. S&P 500 contracts jumping to session highs after Moderna said its vaccine test yielded signs it can create an immune system response in the body. Right now, S&P futures are up about 80 points. Dow futures up 731 and NASDAQ futures up 169. The DAX in Germany is up about 4%. 10-year Treasury down 7/32, yield 0.66%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is up 9.25%, up $2.73 at $32.16 a barrel. COMEX gold is up 0.3% or $4.80 at $17.61.10 an ounce. The euro 1.0832 against the dollar. British pound 1.2157, and the yen is at 107.38. Moderna shares are up more than 32% in early trading. And Hertz Global Holdings named Paul Stone as president and CEO effective immediately. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Lisa.
Karen, thanks so much. Big day on Wall Street. We'll give you more data checks here through the morning. Right now, Lisa Abramowitz and Tom Keene with our Global Wall Street Chat of the Day. And we do that with Michael Mayo with Wells Fargo, senior analyst, barely describes his tenure is gazing at our too big to fail banks, the regional banks, and those underneath as well. Michael Mayo, with this crisis, with the originality of the moment we're in, when does the big roll-up begin? When do we begin to see a lot of combinations to keep the revenue line going?
Well, Tom, thanks for having me on. I wouldn't be surprised to see half of the banks consolidated over the next decade, and the move by PNC to raise $11 billion by selling its stake in BlackRock gives them a war chest. Now, it's not an immediate move by them, but it gives them firepower to go ahead and pursue acquisitions, sometime, during this recession. And remember, during the global financial crisis, this is the bank that bought the Cleveland-based bank, National City, for a song. They have a record of performing very well with acquisitions.
So, Mike, when you talk about consolidation, about half potentially consolidating, a lot of people would think that you are talking about smaller regional banks. However, Goldman Sachs very much in the forefront of people's minds, especially after Berkshire Hathaway reported that it sold off most of its stake in the bank. What do you expect for Goldman Sachs, and what do you make of this Warren Buffett move?
Well, let's pull the lens back on the Warren Buffett move. He did sell off most of his stake in Goldman Sachs, but he kept most of his other bank stock holdings. In fact, he added to PNC, he added to Regional Bank US Bancorp, and he still has one of his biggest holdings in bank stocks in history. So the greatest investor of all time is saying it's still time to own bank stocks. So in a way, Warren Buffett is the last man standing for being so bullish on bank stocks. Now, the exception is Goldman Sachs, and Goldman Sachs is revamping its business model to a degree. Some of the old is great. They're some of the best risk managers, one of the best capital market players in the world. But some of their new directions, such as expanding with credit cards and going from Wall Street to Main Street, that waits to be seen, and that's not always everybody's cup of tea.
So what's the problem with Goldman Sachs as Warren Buffett and others see it?
Well, look, we are bullish on banks, and we still recommend Goldman Sachs just as a pure value play. I mean, here's a company that marks their balance sheet to market every day, and they trade at a big discount to book value, and they're great risk managers. So, but when it comes to the growth story, so I'm saying we are still buyers of Goldman. Our top pick, by the way, is Citigroup and PNC, but still buyers of Goldman further down the list. But the issue out there is, the Marcus expansion strategy. That's the consumer strategy. They're trying to expand in what's called cash management, the business of the big multinational firms around the world. And they're really unproven at that. And it will be a few years until you can see that part of the growth strategy pan out. So they're pivoting, and it takes some time to see if that pivot's going to pay off.
Mike Mayo, we got a listener question comes in. This is Sonali down in Tribeca. And Sonali wants to know, Mike Mayo, how's Mr. Solomon doing? I mean, you're following all this, and, you're the folks, you got to understand, Mike Mayo goes into a sell-side meeting and everybody turns white. How's Mr. Solomon doing at Goldman Sachs? I mean, is he rallying the troops around a new vision? Is it working?
It's not working yet, but they're planting a lot of seeds. So I think the approach from Goldman Sachs, whether it's today or for the last, 150 years, is they plant a lot of seeds, and you aren't always sure which seeds are going to, create plants that bear fruit. So I think so far it's a question mark. It's not bad. It's not good. It just hasn't panned out quite yet. I will say Goldman Sachs is part of a group of the largest U.S. banks where you could say Goliath is winning in capital markets. So you can group Goldman Sachs along with Citigroup, Bank of America, JP Morgan, and Morgan Stanley. Right. Those 5 banks, including Goldman, have gained market share against the next largest banks, especially the European banks. They do have capital to deploy, and their first quarter was quite strong, and some of these record investment-grade issuances, they benefit from that too. So short-term, they're doing fine. Long-term, they've done great, but the medium-term, it's still, like I said, the jury is out.
Okay, but Mike, very quickly here, the final question. Are these big banks constrained by the government? I mean, can one of these banks go buy a super regional? Can one of them, do a transaction, whatever? How constrained are they by federal government?
Well, Tom, you've been around for a long time, and but when you get the
Pharaoh leaves and Mayo comes in. What's that about?
But look, the political environment would not allow. In fact, by law, the largest banks, JP Morgan and Bank of America, are not allowed to go ahead and buy traditional banks. Yeah. And when you take the largest banks, 2 of the largest banks merging, that's not going to happen. But having some of the other large banks buy regional banks buy regional banks, buying smaller banks, that certainly can happen, and also buying non-banks and fintech players and others. And one thing you can think about here, and I just want to pull back to the bullish view that we have on bank stocks, is that whether it's Warren Buffett, the way we look at things, this interest rate environment is going to normalize at some point. In fact, our firm expects the 10-year Treasury yield to double by the end of the year, or a bear steepener. Wow. And if you get that bear steepener to that magnitude, the bank stocks will not only be up today, as they're likely to be, but certainly for the rest of the year.
Mike Mayo, thank you so much with Wells Fargo. Greatly appreciate that today. At least I'm getting it from all sides today.
I think that I agree with you. It was a beautiful weekend, Tom Keene.
It was.
You want to just keep going back to that.
And they couldn't open the champagne. Then they came in. They took the champagne out, of course, because that's completely inappropriate for radio. But the orange juice this morning is really, really good, Lisa.
I'm sure, especially spiked with that champagne.
Futures up 82. Dow futures up 754. This is Bloomberg.
Hey, y'all. Jeff Foxworth.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Imagine winning 10 grand. Yes! With Set for Life, you could win 10 grand every month for 30 years. Get in! Amazing! Woo! Yes! Sweet! Unbelievable! Set for Life from the National Lottery. Your numbers make amazing happen. Play Monday online or on the app. Prize may be capped. Rules, procedures and game-specific rules apply. Players must be 16 or over.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. To stay alert, you must remain at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit your contact with other people. If you have to go out, keep your distance from others. 2 meters apart where possible. Continue to wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Okay, here we go.
With the NFL draft in the books and the schedule set, check out a TuneIn podcast for daily updates on the lead up to the 2020 season. Like the Ringer NFL show, where a rotating cast of Ringer experts talk with players, coaches, and special guests about the NFL landscape.
A lot of the other teams that we consider...
Or ESPN's NFL Live.
If there are some delays because of the COVID-19...
Search sports on TuneIn to explore these pods and much more.
You love TuneIn for live-breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. The best sports story all day, 20 minutes a day, 5 days a week. ESPN Daily.
Search ESPN Daily to listen.
In case you didn't know, TuneIn lets you listen to the same radio stations you pick up on your home or car radio, except you can hear them from anywhere. If you want to find a station from somewhere else in the world, navigate to the By Location section under Browse. Keep exploring with TuneIn.
Want to relive the glory of college football?
Balls over a man, into the end zone.
Come explore TuneIn's classic game replay collection to hear ESPN's complete coverage of the 2019 New Year's 6 bowl games. Don't miss your chance to re-experience the Rose Bowl, the 2020 National Championship, featuring Clemson and LSU.
There's going to be 2 champions on the field tomorrow night. There's going to be 1 team hold up the trophy.
10, to the 5, touchdown! Search classic game replays to listen for free.
The first time.
We always talk about the losers in a trade war.
You benefit if you're just further away from China.
So that you can too.
What are the ramifications if she crumbles or doesn't crumble?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening. From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Surveillance Economics.
There's no other way to say the world economy is in awful shape.
Whether it's a few months or 18 months, eventually it will come to an end. The economy will revive.
Finance.
Many people will take the Fed to task. I think the Fed should be applauded.
We only have limited tools. It's up to the fiscal authorities to do something about it.
Investment.
In a couple of years from now, things are going to be back to probably where they were at the very beginning.
Bloomberg Surveillance with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney on Bloomberg Radio.
Good morning, everyone. Paul Sweeney and Tom Keene, Bloomberg Surveillance, big up markets. We'll get to that in a moment. A huge risk-on feel today. Lots going on this week, including Chairman Powell before the Senate later on, and just much more news flow, a better tone to the markets today. Bloomberg Surveillance brought to you by Cohn Resnick Advisory Assurance Tax. Get breaking tax, legislative, and business insights for financial firms. Cohn Resnick is ready to help. Visit their Coronavirus Resource Center today, cohnresnick.com/COVID-19. Paul, up 40, up 60, and now what, Paul? Up 80 points on S&P futures.
Yeah, we're up 80 points, Tom. Just looking at the S&P up about 3%, the Dow up over 3.3%, NASDAQ up about 2%. Looking over to Europe, Tom, you're looking at the European markets all up about 3 to 4%. I want to point out one of your favorite metrics, Tom. The VIX is now well below 30. We're 28.7. That's off 3 full points on the VIX. So, kind of certainly, as you were mentioning earlier, a risk-on feel to the market. We've got an accommodative Fed, and we may even have some positive news coming out, Tom, as it relates to potential vaccines down the road from our good friends at Moderna.
As we just talked to Mike Mayo, he's talking about a lift in yields over the months and the quarters, even years. You see that here in the short term with a 2-year yield 0.16%, 10-year yield, the benchmark 0.68%, a solid 4 basis point higher yield move there as well. I should point out gold. Let me look down here on the terminal as it is on my wonderful iPhone. $17.53 the ounce on gold. All of this started with, Chairman Powell's appearance last night on 60 Minutes, and of course, much of the observation over the weekend of a better America recovering from the pandemic. And then there was another lift this morning off of medical news. With that stock report, our David Wilson.
Thanks, Tom. Well, Paul already mentioned it's all about Moderna in early trading, up almost 32%. Data from a first-stage study showed the company's proposed coronavirus vaccine could create an immune system response. Now, the vaccine didn't raise any major safety issues, and that was really the focus of the initial research. More to come for sure. Moderna, the second most active stock in early trading. The most active is Sorrento Therapeutics, which is surging for a second day. It's up 37%. The drug developer came out Friday and talked about how he proposed coronavirus antibody stopped infections in a lab test, and Sorrento would soared Friday by 158%. So definitely more to come on that score. You're seeing the bank stocks higher. Chairman Powell talked about how the central bank has, quote, a lot more we can do, end quote, to bolster the economy in that interview with CBS that was aired at least in part on 60 Minutes. You got Bank of America up 4.5%, Citigroup also up 4.5%, JP Morgan Chase up 4%, Wells Fargo up 5%. You've got the automakers higher as North American production resumed this week. Ford Motor, one of the most active stocks, up about 4%. General Motors up 5.5%. Fiat Chrysler up 6%. Now, Fiat is working with the Italian bank Intesa Sanpaolo on a state-backed line of credit equivalent to $6.8 billion. You're seeing energy stocks higher after oil rallied above $30 a barrel in New York trading. ExxonMobil up 4.5%, Chevron up 3.5%, and Occidental Petroleum's up 6.5%, even though France's Total abandoned a plan to buy the company's assets in Algeria and Ghana. Then you look at the airlines, you see American up 8%, Delta up 8.5%, United up 9%. And discount carrier Spirit Airlines up 11% after being raised the equivalent of buy from hold at Evercore ISI. Then you turn to the cruise lines. Carnival's up 10%, Royal Caribbean's up 10%, Norwegian up 9%. So those travel stocks are definitely higher in early trading. T-Mobile up about 0.75%. Japan's SoftBank Group is in talks to sell part of its stake in the wireless company to controlling shareholder Deutsche Telekom. That's according to the Wall Street Journal, citing unnamed people familiar with the matter. PerkinElmer, though, down 4.5%. The medical diagnostic company is under investigation in an alleged Medicare fraud, according to Reuters. The report said the probe is focusing on cancer tests. And also, Reuters saying a PerkinElmer spokeswoman said the company wasn't aware of any issues. One more for you. Bluebird Bio down 3.5%. The gene therapy developer is raising $400 million in a share sale.
Bloomberg Stocks Editor Dave Wilson, thank you so much. You mentioned oil, Dave. Just looking at WTI here, $32.57 a barrel. It's up 10% here, so a pretty solid rebound we've seen over the past couple of weeks in crude oil. All right, so let's talk about, remember, a couple of years ago, Tom, all the rage was for American companies to move their official headquarters offshore to avoid U.S. taxes. Well, it now appears that even after doing that, they still may qualify for aid from the Federal Reserve as it relates to COVID-19. To get a sense of what this all means, we welcome Arthur Levitt, former chairman of Securities and Exchange Commission and a Bloomberg LP board member. Arthur, thank you so much for joining us. It seems a little odd to me that a company that would move its headquarters overseas would then still qualify for U.S. COVID-19 aid. What's going on?
Well, it certainly looks like that's the case. Ron Wyden, a senator from Oregon, said that under no circumstances should that happen. No company that's moved overseas to avoid taxes should get a bailout. Now, tax lawyers created what they called corporate inversions in the early 80s as a way for companies to escape what was then a 35% corporate tax rate in this country. But Trump on Thursday floated levying additional taxes on companies that manufacture products outside the United States. And that's certainly going to capture some of these companies that qualified for Fed aid.
Come on, Arthur. This is ageless, and you're truly one of the nation's experts in this. I mean, folks, to give you an idea, Arthur's Labrador Winthrop has a Cayman Island shell corporation. Right. Be sure that he does. Okay. Arthur, come on. Everybody listen to this knows these guys got the smartest tax lawyers, and with the body of the law, they've gone out and done what they've done. Good morning, all of you listening in Dublin. Great. And now they want the aid of the U.S. government. What do you think? I mean, should these corporations get the aid of the government given this pandemic?
Well, it's interesting. Some countries outside the United States are withholding virus aid from companies that practice tax avoidance. France and Denmark, for instance, have said that companies operating in tax havens won't get taxpayer-funded bailouts.
Why should
they? That they shouldn't, but the power of companies to extract tax benefits from the U.S. government is simply enormous, and certainly the virus has opened the door to all kinds of tax saving schemes, and there are going to be excesses that are caught up in what really have become tax windfalls.
So, Arthur, it's just going to boil down to some political kind of fight here. Where the folks that are for aggressive tax treatment go against those who are saying, hey, you need to pay your taxes, where you're incorporated, where you do business.
I think that's true, but I think the forces of those who want favorable tax treatment is far greater than the Ron Wydens of this country, unfortunately. So that if I had to bet on which direction this is going to go in, I think there will be corporate boondoggles in terms of favoring tax credits to corporate America.
So, Arthur, I mean, what's the sense here from corporate America? I mean, this is tough public relations, too. I mean, you could spin it the other way that you could be shamed into taking some of this money here. How do you think that these corporations are going to kind of look at this?
I think they'll cynically look at the fact that so much is going on now, so many suggestions with respect to taxes, so many directions being taken in terms of tax policy, that they'll be lost in the backwash, and it's safe for them to keep pressing for whatever tax advantages they can get. Don't underestimate the power of corporate America with respect to taxes.
Arthur Levitt, thank you so much. He's the former chairman of the Securities and Exchange Commission, and of course, Bloomberg LP board member. Paul, you just can't have the free lunch. I mean, everybody. I shouldn't voice my opinion, but to me, it's just insane.
If we're going to talk about tax relief, how about the SALT taxes for the good folks in the Metro New York area and some
it's
of the
a
other
huge
states?
deal. I can tell you, folks, anecdotally, talking to real estate people in that, the SALT tax issue has had a profound impact.
Yep.
In the tri-state region. Right now, a profound first word news. Here's Michael Barr.
Tom Paul, thank you very much. President Xi Jinping said China will make its coronavirus vaccine global once one is available. She addressed the World Health Organization's decision-making meeting shortly after a senior U.S. official suggested Beijing send airline passengers to spread the coronavirus worldwide. Meanwhile, an experimental vaccine from Moderna showed promise early in signs that it can create an immune system response in the body that could help fend off the virus. That's based on a very small early human trial. The process of reopening the economy continues amid the pandemic, with each state and city seemingly taking its own approach. Bloomberg's Martin DeCarroll reports elected officials say they're trying to reopen in the safest way possible.
Businesses and beaches may be reopening, but they won't look or feel normal, not with public officials wary of potential disease outbreaks. Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber on the coming reopening of restaurants and museums.
Everything will be at an incredibly reduced capacity. People will have masks.
In Austin, Mayor Steve Adler is watching his state's surge of cases after it was one of the first to reopen.
It just happens. That's why everybody's staying at home. Shut this thing down.
It's not clear whether the Texas surge is simply due to more testing or if the virus is spreading rapidly, a mystery facing public health officials in many states. Martin DeCarroll, Bloomberg Radio.
Tropical storm Arthur is crawling closer to the North Carolina coast amid threats of some minor flooding and rough seas as the system moves off the southeast seaboard. Arthur formed Saturday off Florida. The official start of the Atlantic hurricane season is June 1st. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Michael Barr. This is Bloomberg. Tom, Paul?
Michael Barth, thanks so much. Let me give you the framework of the market here, folks. We're 15, 3, 18, make it 17 minutes away from the market opening. Futures up 82, Dow futures up 752. Let me give you those levels on SPX. Futures back to 29.28, getting up near SPX 3000, not there yet. Dow futures 24,265, again up 748 points, and the VIX comes in 28.85 in three big figures. The recent low, the recent enthusiasm for the markets was 26.00. That was on May 12. So we're there, but we're not there yet. 28.84 on the VIX. Yields higher as well. No question about that, 0.68% on the 10-year yield. 30-year bond was a 134. We now enjoy a 138 higher yields. It is a risk on.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology, makes innovation happen. NJIT faculty mentored Christoph Camacho when he was a student, helping him co-found a startup and patent a device that uses drone technology for reforestation and to collect valuable data for land management.
I founded Paratrees back in 2016, taking what I learned from my research at NJIT and migrating it to a startup. Our technology is to really enhance land management operations, so we work very closely with land management companies. So we have a drone that performs precision reforestation, and we do storm damage assessment, having access to drones that can collect data so it's much faster. And what is more important, we help them drive management decisions. NJIT has been there every step of the way, going full force with my company.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at seic.com/seize change.
Influential conversation.
A half-price dream holiday, wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free, wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the USwitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
Where will 2020 take you? Somewhere where people care. About each other. About our planet. About creating a better world for everyone. And becoming the best versions of yourselves. Join a community of like-minded individuals at the University of Winchester. Make sure to accept your offer by the UCAS deadline and visit our website to find out more. See the bigger picture. Be the difference. Go to winchester.ac.uk.
24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
And I'm Karen Moscow. U.S. stock index futures extending their gains after an experimental vaccine showed promising early signs of helping to fend off the new coronavirus. We check the markets every 15 minutes throughout the trading day on Bloomberg. S&P futures up about 83 points. Dow futures up 756 and NASDAQ futures up 182. The DAX in Germany is up 4.2%. 10-year Treasury down 10/30 seconds. The yield 0.67%. Yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil is up about 10%, up $2.92 at $32.35 a barrel. COMEX gold is down 0.75%, down $12.80 at $17.4350 an ounce. The euro 1.0843 against the dollar. The British pound 1.2170, and the yen is at 107.42. And the S&P 500 futures jumped to session highs after Moderna said its vaccine test yielded signs it can create an immune system response in the body. Moderna shares are up almost 31% this morning. And that's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Tom and Paul.
Karen, thanks so much. Paul, I think it's so important to explain within the hype of the media that these statements come out in chiseled black font on white paper on a Form 8K, and that these companies are incredibly careful and specific about what they say.
Yep.
They don't trot them out in a cavalier manner. I speed read the Moderna document. I don't want to comment on it other than to say we completely underestimate in the public the specificity of this reporting under the 8K.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Tom. And we get a lot of these data points coming out from various companies. And what I did this morning when I saw the Moderna news early this morning, Tom, I went to just, messaged Sam Fazeli, Bloomberg Intelligence healthcare analyst over in London. I just said, Sam, how important is this? And he just came back. He said, very important. There's going to be a conference call at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. We'll be on it. But this is material. So Moderna coming out, as Karen Moscow was just reporting, with a drug that might really be an interesting advancement in terms of a vaccine. To get a sense of kind of what this all means, we welcome Drew Armstrong, Bloomberg team leader covering U.S. healthcare for Bloomberg News. Drew, thanks so much for joining us. Just put this in context to what this could mean as it relates to a vaccine. How important do you think this is?
Well, I think it's extremely important, but as you all note, it's important to caution that these are very, very early data. That said, everything that we're seeing here is a good sign, and it matches up with some of the hopes you had. The most important thing here is the safety data, given that this is any vaccine is going to be given to millions of otherwise healthy people. And, in medicine, one of the things they say is, first, do no harm. And that's, I think, never more true than with vaccines. And the safety profile of this thing looks relatively good. You had a few things that they call injection site reactions that I think if you've gotten a vaccine recently, some folks probably remember, soreness, redness, like symptoms that all seem to resolve. And then they took a look at some lab test data that is designed to say, okay, so we've given you this shot. Does your body now produce an immune response that we're looking for, that hopefully in the real world would be protective against infection from the virus? And there are some good small early signs of that as well.
So, Drew, it's interesting here. I mean, I find myself just kind of looking forward here. Does Moderna suggest a time frame for any of this? I know it's historically when you bring a new drug to market, years and years and years, and now these companies are trying to get them out in months. Does Moderna have a thought for its product?
Yeah, so they are talking about beginning phase 2. That's the middle stage of testing, more or less immediately, and then a final phase 3 trial, which would be used in many thousands of healthy volunteers, and that's where you put this thing up against the virus in the real world. That would begin as soon as July. So this is a very accelerated timetable. It's in line with the kind of the global race to move far faster than normal and do some of this stuff at risk that's being pursued here. So, the hope, I think, is to have final results from a lot of these trials, or at least preliminary results from a lot of these later trials later in the year. You can start making decisions about wider production and things like that.
And now, folks, the dumb surveillance question of the day, brought to you by Tom Keene. Drew, let's say there's like 12 people chasing after the Holy Grail here. Are all of their presumed drugs, vaccines, whatever you want to call them, are they all sort of modifications of the same thing? Or is the Moderna drug a lot different than the Oxford vaccine, et cetera?
Yeah, you're actually seeing a lot of different technologies applied here. If you wanted to generally break vaccines into a couple different categories, you can use pieces of the virus, dead, inactivated particles from the virus.
Yep.
But they're enough for the body to then recognize that there is some kind of invader or piece of an invader and create the antibodies. Another way of doing it is to use what's called a live attenuated vaccine, which is essentially the virus, but you have in some way hobbled it so it can't create an infection. Or as meaningful enough of an infection. And it's a way of essentially getting the same response, but you're just using a different strategy there. This uses what's called mRNA technology, which essentially uses messenger RNA, which is a translation point from DNA.
Matt, good morning and thank you.
It's kind of a translating step, and it gets the cells in the body to produce proteins from the virus without producing the virus itself, and then those proteins are what makes the immune response from the body happen. So, all of them are essentially ways of tricking the body into recognizing or thinking that it's been infected, creating the immune response you would have from an infection. They all get you kind of the same point, but each has different profiles in terms of how you research and develop it, manufacture it, and how you produce it.
Drew, thank you so much. Drew Armstrong with us, an update there on Moderna. And frankly, folks, we'd like to have Drew on every day when there's always
he simplifies it. Even I understand what's going on there.
Yeah,
healthcare stuff.
I mean, but it'll be great, if there's like 11 therapies out there that they're working on, maybe it's 20. It'd be great to have Drew on every day with this good news for us. And of course, we see it in the markets, Paul. Futures up 80, Dow futures up 743. The VIX in a solid three big figures, 28.78. I guess, Paul, I'd frame that as sort of weekend glow up 40. Real understanding that what Chairman Powell said was towards let's get to it, let's support the nation, Washington, another 20, and then Moderna with a real lift here later today from up 60 to about up 80 in futures.
Yeah, maybe it was just even some decent weather for much of the country over the weekend, people getting out. And, I just saw a lot of folks on bikes. I saw a story on the Bloomberg terminal, Tom. Bike sales are up, 30% over the past couple of months. They can't even find get the supply they need. So perhaps just a little bit of people just feeling a little bit better about things holistically here. And the Moderna news certainly helped.
We are holistically up here with risk on 2-year 0.16%, 10-year yield 0.68%, higher yields. Stay with us. This is Bloomberg.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command has SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Imagine being denied an apartment because of your religion, or your race, or because you have children, or a disability.
It's so wrong. Yes, but who has the power to stop this?
You do. Each of us has the power. The law is on your side. It's illegal for landlords to discriminate because of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, disability, or familial status. If you suspect that you have experienced housing discrimination, file a complaint with HUD immediately
so we can investigate it. Fair housing is your right.
Use it.
To learn more, visit HUD.gov/fairhousing. That's HUD.gov/fairhousing. Or call 1-800-669-9777. 1-800-669-9777. A public service message from HUD in partnership with the National Fair Housing Alliance.
This is a half-price dream holiday. Wouldn't want to miss that. A takeaway for free. Wouldn't want to miss that. And 30 gigs data for just £10 a month on Smarty Mobile. You definitely don't want to miss that. Our Smarty SIM comes packed with 30 gigs of data and unlimited calls and texts for just £10 a month on a 1-month plan. That's why Smarty won Best Value SIM-only network in the Uswitch Mobile Awards 2020. Don't miss out. Search Smarty Mobile. Smarty. Simple, honest mobile. Smarty.co.uk.
At George, we know there's nothing better than catching up with your mates. That's why we've invited Fern McCann over for a cuppa and a chat with some of her besties. Because staying in is the new going out, right? Join us and Fern over on our Instagram TV at Georgia Asda to get all the latest gossip, giggles and fashion tips. Sunday at 6 p.m.
This is an important update from the government about coronavirus. We all need to stay alert so we can control the virus and reduce the risk of infection. To stay alert, you must remain at home as much as possible. Work from home if you can. Limit your contact with other people. If you have to go out, keep your distance from others, 2 meters apart where possible. Continue to wash your hands regularly. Do not leave home if you or anyone in your household has symptoms. Stay alert. Control the virus. Save lives.
Picture in your mind a stylish Audi with striking LED headlights, sporty alloy wheels, and some of our most advanced features, including a 10-inch digital cockpit and smart assistant systems like lane departure warning. Picture what that Audi looks like. Now think smaller. The Audi A1. It's not a small car, it's a small Audi. Visit audi.co.uk. Audi. Vorsprung durch Technik.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Surveillance.
Good morning, I'm Karen Moscow, along with Tom Keene and Paul Sweeney. The opening bell brought to you by SEI. Asset managers don't get results that are off the charts when their solutions are off the shelf. Learn how SEI's operating platform can turn infrastructure into a competitive advantage at SEIC.com/IMS. And the S&P 500 is higher at the open. It's up 2.4% or 69 points at 2933. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 2.9%, up 701 points at 24,379. And the Nasdaq's up 1.8% or 164 points at 9179. 10-year Treasury down 9/32, yield 0.67%. The yield on the 2-year 0.15%. NYMEX crude oil up 10.8%, up $3.19 at $32.62 a barrel. COMEX gold down 0.2% or $2.90 at $17.53.30 an ounce. The euro 1.0844 against the dollar. The yen 107.35.